then.
Bye, buddy. It's time to go
Bye,
sling
bye.
some drugs. Some
No.
drugs. Alrighty. I am going to be right back, chat. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna go get myself some refreshing water and a little bit of a snack, I think. So I will be right back and we will resume the final day. Probably not though, because I don't know if I'm gonna be actually streaming for 4 hours because I'm kind of tired. But you know, we'll do the thing. High while dealing the high. And then SUBATHON say 13. And we'll be doing some schedule 1. So I will be right back, chat.
He's a bit chungus. He's a bit chunky.
the chat. Time for a drugs chat, cause we are back and it's time for drugs. And I have Buffy, my best friend, gonna help me wheel and deal some drugs.
I thought you were singing
Like
it
that.
around because I had the stream on unmuted. So it's just you started to like cut in with your own singing, and it was weird.
Hello. Oh my bad. Mute me. Hold on.
I just
Those are
did.
weird. Good. This one. This one. This one. And then we fix your Fuji tech to be normal. Yep. Launch the game. Is there an update? 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 I wonder what the update's for. What? And an alternate version. The alternate version is identical to the next, except different mono instead of L. The scripting packet isn't quite performant, but it generally handles errors a bit better. Oh, okay. Oh, there's a clear trash command if you have too much trash and it's bogging down your game.
I wonder if because we've unloaded and reloaded, you're gonna be able to see all the trash.
Oh, dude, that'd be great. And my
There's
game
not as much as
is...
I think you think there is, because I've been trying to clean it up every now and again, but there is more than I can keep up with. Well, we're moving anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I could see it, I'd happily pick it up every time. It's just I can't see it. I can feel you all around me, burning the air I breathe. Okay. I just realized at the end of the, like, introductory, it says, please don't do drugs.
Yeah, I know, it's time for drugs.
Time for drugs. Time for drugs.
You joining in for some drugs, or are you busy?
I'll DM him.
He's in chat, so I was just asking him.
Yeah, but that was like a little bit ago, I think. For drug. I can play their music in case. Would you think of Elaine's first, as Kiwi calls it, celebrity stream? Or celebrity interview? Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think of that?
You're a big deal now.
No, I'm not.
I didn't get a chance to watch that, so I'll have to watch the
VOD.
But I was mentioning Pixels about how I wanted to say so many horrible things in the chat, but I wasn't.
Thank you for behaving yourself.
I was being so
thank
nice.
you. I love that. I was being so nice. You don't understand, Elaine. I was being so nice. I was
anxious from ruining you. So nice.
Oh, you know how much I wanted to mention OnlyCans when you were talking about games that you enjoyed recently?
Oh my god.
Oh.
No.
The highlight of my gaming career. OnlyCams.
Exactly.
The highlight of my career, OnlyCams. That'd be hilarious.
When did I order that?
Boys. It's Friday evening. It's gonna be great. We have so much time to wheel and deal as the night goes on.
Apparently I ordered more weed in my game at some point and completely forgot.
Rip. Well, get out of that game and join our game.
Yeah, I am. I'm saving right now. No better way to put it. I've literally been watching grass grow.
Valid. I brought up the Drow Sex Dungeon. You're fine, Boffy. He did. But that wasn't... I mean, I feel like it's not as bad as some things Boffy would do. Pixels was telling me how you were scheming to see if the TTS would work, but I didn't have the program open, so
I thought about it. I didn't try it. I thought about it.
Yeah, how you were thinking about it.
I wasn't gonna try it.
That would have been really funny. High key, that would have been really funny. That would have worked like that.
I'm so glad that Devouring brought up the Drow Sex Dungeon.
That guy's like microphone was giving me was freaking me out sometimes because it was really directional, and he'd like move his head to a different part of the microphone sometimes, and it would sound like he was coming from a different direction, and it would make me jump. Happened like 3 times.
Are you talking about Stormies?
Yeah.
Oh, whoa! I didn't notice that because I have only one head cuff on.
Yeah,
So I
Ryan
could,
said the same thing. Do you guys just like only use
Who
one
sits there? I'm sorry. Who sits there with one headphone on?
Traumatized people do. Me, because when I was at home, if I couldn't
I
hear
guess
my
I don't have anyone
mom
else in my
call me the
house,
first
so.
2 times, she would get real mad at me, and now it's just natural. Like, this is just how I wear it, and I get like too self-conscious if I put them both on. Did you talk about chat turning BLT into a menace yesterday? Yes, I did. I did bring it up because they were like, "Oh,
how much money on good headphones to only wear one headphone?"
Shut up. Shut up.
I guess I've lived alone long enough where I don't have the need to listen out around me.
I feel weird if I am wearing both headphones and my door is open, but I usually just have my door shut. So
that's valid, but the thing is like if I'm really focused on like what I'm doing, then like I'm gonna like horse blind myself, right? And I'm only gonna be able to see in front of me, like tunnel vision, right? And then if Pixels walks in, he will have to touch me for me to notice, and I will be so scared.
Reach out and touch me.
Or my headset around the house, so I keep one off if I'm like cooking with it on. Yeah, if he's cooking, he has it off, but most of the times he has it. Yeah, I'm the only one in the house that has it off on one ear.
The reason why I switched to wearing both was my neighbor that I had for the longest time had a dog that wouldn't shut the fuck up.
Well, that's valid.
And it interfered with my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. What is going on?
Oh, you started moving shit? Nice.
No, just the stuff that was in the car.
Oh, okay. Okay. Dude, it is dark as fuck. We ended late. Alright, I'm gonna go start getting stuff. I also, because like if someone were to knock at the door, I would be the only one to hear it in the daytime. Because Pixels can't hear it. So I said no, don't reason why I do it.
Oh, it's police curfew, dang.
Yeah.
I guess we can't just kind of wait for it to become daytime in this game. That sucks.
No. Oh, I mean, we could make it day, but I feel like we'd waste a day doing that.
Yeah. Where am I even going?
In order to not scare Elaine when entering a room, Pixels could send a DM to Elaine saying, "I'm standing right behind you." I'd cry. That'd make me more scared.
Behind you.
It's so funny because it's funnier because it's always a delayed reaction. Like before my brain like processes that he's there, my brain goes, "Huh?" And then he'll be like, "Hey," and then I'll scream.
Oh my god, there are roaming police cars now. I don't think that was in the game before.
Yeah, the heat gets up once you get more higher leveled. There's cars that start to. I don't know how bad it gets, but I have lulls in my drug selling, so I feel like the heat dies on me, and then I sell 60 bricks of meth, and then the heat gets back up.
I am under arrest.
What?
I am wanted.
Did you?
Well, yeah.
Did you try to skate in front of the police car?
Our employee's a demon.
Oh man. Don't get out of the house, Rhino. I'm too close to the house. Stay in the house.
I'll open the front door for you so you can run away. It's trying to force me to shut the door. Like it was forcefully shutting the door. So where is the... You might want to stand in the kitchen because they can walk up to the back door on you. Oh, it's...
I can't open the door because police are nearby.
Right here, I got you. Come in.
There's... Oh. There was a police guy out there, by the way. You should shut it.
So, can you see the mixing table? Not the mixing table, sorry, the chemistry table?
This one.
Yeah.
Okay, because you see it there, I'm standing on it in the wall.
Yeah, he's standing on it.
Can you empty it and pick it up?
This.
It's still burning. Did you just start a new burn?
No, I can't even interact with it.
Okay, I picked it up.
Oh, cool.
Our bed.
Oh, beautiful. Now I can interact with it.
We're
that was
moving
weird.
to
Yeah, we're moving.
Okay, I'll grab my meth ingredients.
Meth ingredients. Oh, by the way, I'm dropping off the strawberry cow at the post office tomorrow because they close at 5. Sounds good. Thank you, Kiwi. Thank you for not sending him to the gulag.
Are you sure where it's going is any better?
Yeah, of course. My home is way better than the
The cat
donations
just
gulag.
tears it apart.
What if
Imagine my cat's not very destructive with stuffed animals, but it would be very funny if that was like the one she chose.
my mom gets dirty looks from the people at the Goodwill place? Because she
Why?
goes to the Goodwill to buy stuff for our dog. And she'll buy these, like, beautiful, like, loved, like, teddy bears that would be really great for, like, any kid. And it's just, like, gives them to dog to destroy. Like, and it's just, like, heartbreaking to, like, the people that work there.
My mom does that with baby clothes. She
Oh my
likes to
God, I
dress
have
up her
all- I
dogs.
forgot I picked up all the meth ingredients. I was about to. Oh man.
I'm
It's
just
okay,
wondering why
it's
y'all
filled
are
with-
running through that far of a distance just to
Thank you, Fredo.
move when we could
We could what?
We didn't
do
bring
it
the
when
car.
it's safer in the day.
I-
Because we
I can
waste a
sleep.
day.
I can sleep whenever.
Alright,
I mean,
hold on, let
eventually
me
the
get
time stops and the cops still are out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
alright. Hold on. I moved the bed, so I'll sleep once I get to the
Oh
barn.
no, I'm gonna get to the apartment then. The apartment's the closest thing to me with a bed.
I don't fucking know where I am. It's so fucking dark. And like it doesn't help because like there's a window right behind me reflecting off my monitor, so I can't fucking see. This is like Slenderman. I feel like I'm playing Slenderman with my gold skateboard.
You're the one who likes to run around in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I know. I'm not used
Oh,
to.
look,
This is past
hey.
the point that I'm
Oh, here's all
at,
the
so
meth
it's
ingredients.
like.
Okay, I'll go make sure.
Yeah, I put it there because
Cool.
This is like past the point that I'm at, so I'm like, I don't really, like, I don't know this area as well. Alright, I'm at the barn. I'm putting the bed down.
we're already sleeping.
Alright, I gotta take all the stuff off the market.
What would
so
be
that way I
nice is
can-
if they had like implemented backpacks. So before you could get a car, you could get a
Yeah,
backpack.
yeah, that would be
Too.
nice.
It's in their plans. They posted about it. They're
Oh,
gonna
did they?
they offer fanny packs, backpacks, and duffel bags.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
The duffel bags sound really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I sold quite a bit of meth before coming over to this game, and sold roughly $90,000 in meth.
Damn! A lot. I could. Here. He's in here for now. I'm gonna pick up more. Bobby, do you want me to bring the truck? You want me to bring the truck to the bungalow?
Yeah, that would help.
Oh my god,
Can I get a
it
ride back
reverse
with you?
camped.
If you
Yeah.
hold right click, you can control how it the direction it's looking.
Oh, okay. Alright.
Oh my god, we have so much weed, bro.
Hell yeah, we do.
Some drugs on me.
Yeah, but it's just like plain weed. It's...
Oh, I can put this in here. I'm just putting some stuff down for now, and I'll move it later for the.
Hi, V. Stash some cash in duffel bags because you can't trust banks, mood.
All right, I'm in.
Alright. I don't know how you're in here. I tried to get in with Bobby before, and I couldn't get in.
Yeah, but it was broken. It wouldn't let you get in by yourself last time either, remember?
Good point. We need to go to the...
Soon we'll all have our own vehicles.
I have my own vehicle.
That's the
Wait,
doctor.
Hi, Rainer.
You know,
Welcome
all
on
the
in.
sketchy shit we do in this game, this is the most in danger I have felt.
Good. You're so cute during the interview. Oh, I'm glad. It was fun. I liked it. It was my first interview.
Well, alright, I'm gonna run to the apartment.
Okay, fine. Hello, officer. Alright, I'm here.
Hey.
Hey.
I just like that it looked like a person escaping from a loony bin just hopped out of your car.
Yep. That in there, and then I can take. I think this guy. No, I can't take that guy. I'll take these guys. Whee. I think I learned that the gold skateboard is actually like statistically better.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't just look cool, which I was like, oh, that's cool. 'Cause I wasn't completely sure. Oh, but this gravelly road is terrible for the skateboard. Oh my god. Oh,
Holy
good thing I'm with the dealer.
Jesus.
What's up, dog? Spook you?
Yeah, because the door didn't, like, I clicked at the same time you did, so the door didn't open for me. You phased through it.
Yeah, dude, I got them powers.
I'm spending too much time around this map.
I'm spending too much time around this map. This is funny. Thank you for the song request, Kiwi. I missed one. Fuck, how did I miss again?
It's gonna take a few travels. I'm not gonna lie.
Yep. That's why I'm doing a little bit of everything.
I've got to get these plants to fully grown before I can pick up the fucking pots they're in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a methodical process.
Okay. Wee. I can't wait till they add other drugs to this. I am just really excited about shrooms.
See, I haven't gotten past. I haven't moved past meth. Jesus, this fucking
that's
room.
understandable.
But yeah, I was going to wait a bit to do it, but I'm like, meth takes a while, but God, does it make a lot of money? It just takes forever to make.
That's valid, yeah. This is the first time I'm being searched and I have nothing on me but my skateboard.
Just for hold space, they'll search faster. I know you don't know that function.
Oh.
I just need these two, these two weed plants to just grow, so that I can destroy them. Because you can't destroy something while it's growing. Apparently, you can't like cancel it. There's no like button to be like, I don't want this anymore. Yeah, since this is full, you might want to take it over there and put it
Yeah. Oh wait, yeah, I could do it like that. Yeah. Oop.
And then use the shelf in there to put everything in the other place.
Yes, sir. I've got 2 shelves on
Why does the
each
Addy
side.
stack up to oh, it did. It just... Oh, never mind.
We have
Oh.
Addy now?
You mean, we've had Addy.
That's
Oh,
literally
I
been
forgot.
something that...
Listen,
that's literally been in all of the mess he has made since he joined.
Listen, I forgot. Yes? Oh my god, what are you doing?
I was trying to see if I could get onto the bed of the truck. I'll just get in.
Oh, we might get searched.
Yeah. Is there anything illegal in the vehicle or on you?
If weed growing tools are illegal, then yes.
Yeah, are weed growing tools illegal?
I don't think so explicitly. I'll have to meet you on the other side of the pass because I do have some meth on me.
I have weed on me.
Oh, then drive the other direction.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't go over the bridge if you got weed.
Listen, I'm not a truck driver, right? I drive
Would
my
you like
skateboard.
me to drive us over to the barn?
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm a professional. Why does
Trust
it not
me,
wanna
I'm
work?
a passenger princess.
Why did I get in the? Hold on, you hit E again. You hit it first before because it's not just a passenger issue. It's a who clicks on it first. Meow.
You guys.
I'm a passenger
Bye,
princess.
Bobby. Yeah, dude.
While I
Wait,
wait for
jump
this
it.
weed to finish, I'm
Oh, it
just
doesn't
cleaning up
jump.
all of the trash in here.
Yeah, good plan.
To make a little bit of money on the side.
Yeah, because we're not gonna make any money today.
Not with that attitude.
Only to wheel and deal past curfew.
It's an investment in our future, not necessarily a loss of income.
Okay, no, that's valid. When looking at driving in like a passenger perspective, the
Yeah,
car looks
kinda
so
clunky.
jittery. Yeah. Hey, I didn't have to drive, so that's alright.
One day you'll have to learn.
I'm also a little bit more familiar with the roads because I've been driving from this game some.
Also valid. Here. And then I'm just gonna take this guy and start loading this guy up with more stuff.
Oh, I see. That's
Here's a lamp for you.
well. This might not be my final. I don't
He's
know.
even
I won't.
growing? I don't think that this
Huh?
plant is growing. I don't think this plant is growing anymore.
Uh-oh.
I think it's because I took the frame away from it and the light.
It
Oh,
won't
yeah.
grow without the light. I think you're right.
Yeah, so
Do you
I
want me
need
to bring
those-
one back?
I need 2 back. A frame and a light.
Okay.
Because you need the frame for the light.
Okay, got it. I'm coming. Rhino, drive the car back.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Listen, I got a board, bro. You got legs. I got a board.
Elaine's got the Rhinos are meth and wheels.
Meth and wheel.
Where did you? Think I saw you.
I'm leaving.
Jesus Christ, there's so much in this room. I've been ferrying to and from this bin since you guys like left.
Oh shit. Oh god damn it.
Did you run right
Be
into
there in a
the?
second, Boffy.
Did you?
I was like, ooh, cool skateboard trick. I could hop over this.
Yeah, the.
It didn't work.
I can
And
hear.
the police car crashed.
The SUV is chasing you, isn't it?
I would really like bigger
Where are
storage.
I'm about to get tased. God damn it. Hey, what's up?
you? You need help getting away?
Nah, it's fine. Oh, god damn it.
Oh, this cop does not know where you are. He ran to the end of the cul-de-sac and is sitting there like he's...
It's
Why is
okay,
he
other
running
cops
into our
found me.
house?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you scared the crap out of me. Because it's not you walking in here, it was you walking in here as the, like, curfew alarm went off. I just
It's
saw
the
someone
police.
burst through the door and
It's the police.
Oh, fuck, what do you mean you found me?
Get to the house. We'll let you in the house.
Okay, I'm coming.
You're gonna come to the front, or you're gonna come to the back door? With that
Front.
speed front door. Got it.
No, you bitch!
It closes
closes by
automatically because it
itself.
doesn't want you in
I'm
here.
at the back door. I'm at the back door. Let me in. Let me in.
It doesn't want you in because it wants you to be. It wants you from the cops.
Ah, yes, right next to the window, a great place to hide from the sight.
Please, please, please. Here.
What? What is this?
Here.
I have a full inventory. Can you put them
I got it.
Oh, God. Okay.
There you go.
I just put the fucking watering can in the truck.
I have it.
Oh, you have one?
Yeah, I just picked it up. Yeah, I picked it up off the rack. I'm like, these need water, so I just
Oh, yeah,
watered them real quickly.
That was my slave's watering can, yeah, I forgot.
Do they
What the
use
fuck?
one, or do they have their own?
They need you to give them one.
Do they really? Okay. Because, like, the
Do
cleanup
that, that
guy,
was
he
just soil
magically
and
creates his own plastic bags. I bought him plastic bags.
No,
Thinking that he did, and...
I even had to put a pair of clippers in there for them.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Hurry up, bro.
I learned how to break into the last building so you can check it out before you buy it.
Oh.
Can you build in there before you buy it?
You can turn the lights on, so I don't know if you could build in there. I'm gonna have to bring something to see if you can place.
Yeah, could you just
something
use
down.
it before you buy it?
Do we have any trash bags?
I don't think I've used trash bags once in this game, so.
Okay. Because I was gonna be like, I can carry a trash can on me. Let me go run and grab a trash bag.
I'm placing the weed planters, but you just move them. We need more rack space.
There are 2 racks in the car bunk boot.
Cool.
Question is do you want to take a mad dash for the new location? Is the boot rear's almost full? Oh, we have a bed. We could just call it here. We could sleep here if we need to.
Pussy. Pussy.
Oh, it has time stopped?
No.
The game has time stop at 4 a.m.
Oh,
It's
but
only
I was
12.
asking if it has yet, because I'm waiting for these.
No,
plants
not
to-
yet.
Oh no, not yet.
I want these to grow before I move on, but I don't know. One of them will
I have
definitely
learned.
grow.
I have learned with the plants because when I was in full swing of production, I didn't always pay attention to the plants first. If you say you fully water them at 3 and then it hits 4, the plant stops growing, but the water still disappears.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Oh, there's one of your plants grown.
Thank God. I need to get my clippers.
Are you gonna fire our current attendant so you can get a new attendant again?
Oh, she already gone. She already gone.
Okay, good.
I had to fire her to get rid of the bed.
Ah, got it. Can someone open the front door, please? Thanks.
Did you get busted by the cops again?
Yeah.
Elaine, you should not be allowed out.
What? I'm helping!
Other people can help without getting hit by fucking attacked by the cops every day.
What do you get? Are you gonna run? Get back here. Get in the car.
No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I wanted to grab the shelf out of the back of the car. I spent too long finding an audio TikTok did not want me to find. That's valid. That's a mood. Oh my god, wait. The TikTok I was talking about on the interview, when I was talking about the beef thing, I think it's actually what I'm thinking of is the one where there's the horse girl and then like her like daughter or whatever runs across and says she needs to shit her pants. Not that she smells like beef. I think I'm getting the beef one and I shit my pants mixed up. I'll have to look that up in a second. I'm coming, Rhino. I'm coming! What the fuck? What the fuck? How dare you park like— what the fuck? You're just bringing it in here?
Yeah, why not?
That's crazy.
Are you humming that fucking repo song?
No! I wish.
It sounds like you're humming that song from that repo meme.
Oh, that's a good song. What is that song even called?
I know you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. I found it. I just need 2 weeks to marinate. Ooh, what'd you make? This is another funny baby one. Okay, I don't think I'll find it. Now I'm humming it. Bitch.
Hey.
Hey, welcome. What else do we have left at the other place?
A bunch of weed.
Alright.
Just like cooked, like grown weed buds and some packaging.
Okay. Do you think mushrooms have enough sugar to make mead?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think mushrooms have sugar.
Mm-mm.
Something about umami meat just doesn't sound pleasing.
Okay, are we just putting all of our beds upstairs?
But yeah, they're upstairs right
Yeah,
now.
you
Actually,
can. Do you have the beds, or do you want me to grab them?
they're upstairs.
We have 3 beds upstairs.
Cool.
Want to ride back?
I don't. Other than moving stuff, I don't think there's anything left to do back there.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think I can get the
And I
last
think
of it.
Elaine's doing all that.
Yeah, I'll just park the truck appropriately.
If there was some way to turn mushrooms into alcohol, someone would do it. Yeah, I feel like it would already be a thing. Oh, maybe I will need hands.
I'm so excited for duffel bags. So it'll
Me
make it feel so
too.
much more like realistic.
No, right?
If any of you guys have done drug dealing in real life, I don't know if that's a common skill set.
I don't think it is. The only person I knew that like had a past with it, was my French Canadian friend.
Oh, are you moving your operation over here?
Technically, you can't place anything under the stairs, so I figured, why don't I live under
So
the
that's.
stairs?
I think it's because this is actually like where you get water from.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
There's one outside too, but
Mm.
I didn't, you know, because I had a
saw
weird
Sears
little
of
corner
Wood
last
and
time, so
server
I
for
figured
alcohol before. Oh yeah.
everyone upgraded. Why not upgrade to understairs?
Whoever made this is someone I like
Right.
because they have set these up nicely into like so that they fit against the wall perfectly in 4s,
Yes.
and
There's 4
A
sections and
worker?
4 weeds, and
a worker can work on 8, right? So everything should be
Mm.
done in 4s in general, just because that's how you can do working like the workers.
Yeah, because according to Google, apparently someone has managed to turn mushroom into wine. According to Google, it's about 1 gram of sugar per cup. So you need a lot of mushroom. But the wine one makes sense because you don't necessarily need sugar to make wine. I don't think.
There's
Dude.
wines that aren't. Yeah, you need sugar for the alcohol.
The thing that makes alcohol eats sugar.
Yeah, but you could just add sugar.
Alcohol is only as alcoholic as it is sugary.
Technically, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So like, yeah.
That's why I've seen a lot of people then make like cotton candy alcohols.
Mead is like the main thing that people really do with like sugary things.
That makes sense.
Also, if you put trash in the dumpster, it disappears the next day. Or at least it's supposed to. Trash bags,
That's
at
nice.
least.
But you don't get the profits.
You're paying for the convenience though.
Dude, I saw this TikTok today, and the account was called Benji, and it says POV, I'm the trash collector, and he filled the Vapors van with the fucking the trash picker upper things.
Oh, like the claw ones, and was just swapping
Yeah,
and picking
yeah,
up the cheeses.
The trash
These
man.
eat sugar and piss out alcohol, isn't it? Why would you describe it as pissing out alcohol?
I mean, didn't
Why
that
would you
one
describe
like
it as
create,
pissing out alcohol?
make alcohol out of the yeast from their pussy?
Well, because your other option is that
Ew,
the
yeah, I've
yeast
seen that one.
shits out.
I prefer shits, I think.
Would you like a bin?
I have a bin on me.
Fun fact, gorillas ferment vegetables.
I'm just holding on to it so that I can test the
That's
theory of
interesting.
setting stuff down in the when I break into the next building.
Ooh.
Wait.
What is
can I
the
put
next
it
building?
Here. You can travel with me during the day if you want.
I'm moving this.
I got deals.
You like
to
my
do, dog.
workstation?
Harry Potter.
Exactly.
That
Wow. Hello,
would make
sir.
much
I
more
would
sense
like
if you
one
were making-
crack, please.
Oh, here you go.
Monday. Mob.
Here's here's one meth for you. I'll put it in the table
That is
here.
not
This
a
is the
meth.
pic.
That
This
was
is-
a TV.
No, I put that there.
Wait, can we put
Oh, yeah.
can we put your bed in there?
No, you can't put anything
No.
under the stairs. In the table here is the pickup
Yes.
area.
Oh yes. Oh, thank you. I can't actually carry this right now.
Oh, you order
It's fine,
something,
I'll
you
just-
can't even take it. Jesus.
Listen, I'm getting the other drugs right now. God.
Oh yeah, I need to put these up. Forgot to put the.
I look like a meth version of a lunch lady. Just looking at your
That's
stream, I'm
true.
like, Jesus.
We should give you like a shelf over here because I can only access this from this side.
Yeah, no. I'll put it somewhere else normally. I was just storing it there for now.
Sounds good to me.
This entire
Consider
wall
we
of the...
drink and not eat alcohol. If yeast shits out alcohol, it would be diarrhea. Okay, that was unnecessarily disgusting. Okay. That's okay. There's no shame in poop talk here.
Don't worry, I'll run with it.
What?
We're gonna need to buy
Was
so
that-
many new shelves, bro.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
Dude, in mine, I have this entire wall is just shelves, large shelves side.
I'm gonna use the car as like storage while I move things.
I have
Yeah.
room too if you need me to hold stuff in the meantime while you swippity swap stuff around, but
I'm good. I should be alright. Just need to. God, we have so much unprocessed weed because of like me having that like one lady going for a while we were playing the other day.
Yep.
Were you just having her put it into the does she deliver it or she just grow it?
She just grows it.
She just grew it. Look at all this we have over here.
Yeah. I
Yeah, and we
see
have like
that.
another whole fucking
And over
shelf
here.
more.
And some over here.
We
You
have
might
a
need
whole
a couple
shelf
more drying
and a
racks
half
just to
more.
get through that faster.
Oh yeah, I'm planning on getting a bunch more. I'm gonna get enough to like.
Can we
fill
buy
this.
shelves? Can we buy shelves from
Oh,
the
yeah.
warehouse? Yeah.
The warehouse? I don't
I don't know if the warehouse sells.
There's another
Hardware store.
hardware store right down the street from our house.
I plan
in
on
the barn.
buying 2 botanists
Ooh.
to run these in the middle here.
Mm-mm. I can't wait to go Benji duffel bags.
See, like, yeah, and so it's good to know that they can
Giveaway.
do up to. You said they could do up to 8, or you said 4
Yeah.
at least.
8.
8.
So
So I like
What
that.
we'll do
That's a nice
is-
round number. But what I don't
Yeah.
like is that 5 plants is perfectly 60 buds of weed. So 3 stacks
Yeah.
is 20. So
Ooh. The
That's-
warehouse
that's
like a
what-
werewolf, but instead of turning into a wolf, they turn into a house. That'd be fucking insane.
oh, can
There's
I?
another
Oh, I
shelf
was gonna
of
say, can I
weed.
put that somewhere
Oh.
else?
Yeah. Go for it. Go for it. Go
One
for it.
second. Because I know where I'm gonna put the weed storage.
Yeah, no sweat.
I put the other
Yeah,
one
I'll go
next
get the
to
other
it.
shelf. Yep, sounds good.
oh, is that so I can watch Meth a Stewart with while I cook? I'm watching a YouTube tutorial of
Stewart.
how to cook meth while I'm sitting here cranking it out.
You're rewatching Breaking Bad for the 50th time.
Yeah, I'm live streaming meth cooking.
You're live streaming.
We need to buy a fuck ton of jars at some point. just to get rid. I think we should just start pushing like OG Kush just to get rid of some of this inventory.
Sounds good. I could give a jar to each of our dealers. We have like a whole shelf. Or no. Yeah, not a whole shelf. I'll have to do one more run back here. Oh fuck.
Where's the nearest gas station to here?
It's
Across
right
the
across
street
the
from the
auto
car
auto
dealership.
shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a bit of a way.
A little bit, yeah. We are. This is like one of the more further locations.
Well, I mean, they might suspect that when you, because you can definitely obviously play where you, as soon as you have the money, you go along. But they might assume that you have capital enough to start ordering materials to you versus running them
See,
down.
I'm sure that you can, but that just feels like a waste of money to me. I don't know. Always.
Costs $200, but
Yeah.
I don't
Maybe once
make.
I've got both of like the weed slaves I plan on hiring going, then maybe at that point we can be like, maybe we should start like leveling up the operation. But
We're still
Or
a humble
just if
small
we can get the
business.
van, that way if
Yeah.
you just go bulk buy stuff, and because I think the other one has it. I know the hardware store has it. So if you
Hey,
park,
no.
there's a parking zone where they'll
Do you know
just
something
load the
that makes me
vehicle.
happy?
What's that?
If you just run straight forward, that you like from the door of the thing, you get to the gas station.
Oh, if you
It's
cut through and
literally
you don't follow them.
It's just straight, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Do you like the TV I put in for your entertainment? Because I just like the idea that you just watch TV while cooking meth in your corner.
There's a method to my madness.
Oh.
Do the whole cooking show thing where it's like, this is how you mix it, and then like the fake stuff, and then all of a sudden pull a tray.
There we go. Then here.
Alright, I got everything.
Do you have a watering can?
I do not.
Where is it?
Should I try to see if you can just drink liquid meth?
I
don't want to waste
you could
it.
try.
Nope, I don't want to waste it.
I feel like that's the kind of thing you can do once.
Yeah, right. Would liquid meth be like hot? Like would it be like molten?
I don't know. I've never made meth. I couldn't tell you what.
Yeah, I haven't done.
Good point.
I'm not the expert here.
In the game, it's cooked over a hot flame.
So you won't presume.
Yeah.
Alright. Buffy, here's another shelf for you. Here's two more shelves, actually.
They're all for him. That's pretty shellfish of you.
You shut the fuck up. You didn't even make that much product.
I'm going industrial.
I'm trying my best.
I'll try. There was a small shelf. Do you have that, Buffy?
Nope.
Just gonna turn the light off in my corner. I'll sit over.
Oh, it's right
Wait,
there.
do I? Is this the small shelf? No.
Yeah, that one's
Wait,
a
is
small
it?
shelf. Yeah, this one's a small.
Oh. Is this one also a small shelf? Yeah. Wow. Okay, I did that by accident, but.
That's fine. I mean, it looks nice where it is. I'm gonna bag. All right, we're gonna put stuff back on the market, boys. Hard and
Yep.
fast. Chipotle. Oh, that's not what I want.
This works out pretty well, actually. I'm looking at this.
Yeah.
So, we've got the mixers in the middle here, and then we've got the two shelves separating them, right?
Mhm.
So I'll mix it, put it in the shelf. You can take it, package it.
That's true.
So I'm gonna move all of this to the shelf next to here. All of the finished stuff, at least.
They got these. My face. I say lovely. Ooh, I'm gonna start packaging the OG Kush for our boys. Our
Oh, well, we've got some
boys.
Chipotle over here, so
Yeah, we just don't have any more baggies.
If you want, you can just take these baggies, because my stuff's gonna take a bit to...
I could also just pick up more at the gas station.
we've got jars. You could just honestly, you could probably jar just everything we have, as long as you have like amount of 5 of it. Because we're gonna need like a big cash injection soon, and
I don't like the way you say that.
what?
Cash injection?
Cash, yeah, cash injection.
That's a term.
It just sounds weird.
I think you just have a dirty mind.
I was thinking more like plastic surgery, but yeah. Sorry, missus. I was making a very sneaky traditional dish that doesn't have a globally recognized kind of green papaya pickled in shrimp paste. Oh, that's good. What's up, dog? Oops, I missed.
This storage.
You...
Oops.
I need them to add ridiculous dance move emotes in this, so I could stand behind the meth table just dancing to
Just
the
dancing.
music.
Hell
Just
yeah.
twerking the meth.
That'd be funny, just back here twerking as meth's cooking.
Hell yeah. If you need an alternate job, you could also do packaging if you want of the weed. Whenever.
Where did you buy
I mean,
where did you find shelves to buy?
Hardware store.
hardware store?
Okay.
They're closed.
The hardware store's open, yeah. Oh wait, we should use that shelf for the exported products. Those pills? Well, luckily they're not pills. They're weed buds. Imagine if these were pills, dude. They'd be so hard to swallow.
A hard pill to swallow? Got it. Mhm.
If a pill is that size, it's probably a suppository. Just like
Probably. That's at least what my meth rocks are. Best way to get them down.
Suppositories? Oh,
skips the
no.
liver.
For rectal use only.
I haven't been telling our clients that. Do you need me to tell them that?
I like my new spot that I found.
What did you?
This is what I do in games when I have a little bit of downtime.
Where are you? I'm afraid because I don't know where you are.
Watching you. Walk towards the front door.
Oh my lord! Son!
Watching your stream and seeing myself out of the corner of your vision before you even noticed is hilarious.
Very scary.
I know exactly where he'd be because that was one of the first places I jumped to when I got into this place.
Alright, now we got a little this, we got a little that. Got a little chipotle. Baggy, got a little more of this. Alright. Brandon. Hi-ho silvers. Hi-ho silvers because they're so, like, special. I'm gonna bag those ones.
I just brought you a ton of bags, so...
Yeah, so I'm gonna start bagging those. Okay, and then we'll also list some hi-ho silvers then.
Okay.
I'm gonna upcharge for them though.
I really don't
I
want to
like-
just walk around and just see somebody with high self because that does horrible things to people. Do you remember what it did?
No, I don't.
It's probably shorter to say what it doesn't do to people.
Hi, Tiki! Thank you for the alert, Tiki!
Nah, Lane, do you remember what it did to your face?
The fuck? I don't like the way you say that. It sounds mean.
Well, horse semen makes your head stretch, remember? Gives you the long
makes your lips
face.
stretch too, you know?
Stop! Ew, 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 ew. I'm thinking about a fucking horse giving a sloppy toppy.
It was really sloppy.
No sloppy verse.
We gonna rest soon to get the.
Did you
next
name
day
one
going,
after
or
me?
we-
Yeah.
I wanted
I
to
think
make
we're
people
just-
bald.
So that we can, like, go in our stride, I think.
Wanted
is
to
where we
make-
Well, yeah, it's a good
Ball.
use so that stuff's ready to go in there.
all the stuff
You
that,
guys
like,
chat.
doesn't
Mhm,
require
mhm.
time, you know?
I like that Elaine has graduated from a area where it's like just an area of just 2 shelves to her own little cubby of.
Oh yeah,
Product.
Yeah.
thanks to Boffy. Also, chat requests that the next product that we have that makes people bald is named after him.
I discovered something that I need to use
Mm.
to do some heinous shit. Do you know what that
Can
is?
we name it what?
You can double infuse things.
Can we name
Can
that
you?
one BLT?
Yeah,
Like, does it make the thing stronger so if
Yes,
you're
but it
paranoid, it'll be
requires-
schizophrenic?
it requires a lot more of it, though. Like, it requires, like, 4 times the amount to double infuse. Like, you need to first infuse regularly, and then you put, like, 4 times the amount in, and you can double it. Like, watch. If... we don't have any, like, beans or chili.
We do. We should, unless we mix it
I
all.
already used it to mix it.
Okay.
We have these water spouts, but we don't use them anymore, because we have slaves.
Yeah.
Because we'll be using slave labor to do it.
Mhm,
And the
mhm,
slaves don't know how
mhm.
to use water spouts. So, I don't know if I should just throw them away, because that's a waste of money. But we also don't have anywhere convenient to store them. So...
The what? Oh,
Leave them in the truck for now?
yeah. Or like put them on a shelf. But don't worry, BLT. We'll name one after you, okay? It'll be heinous. It'll be
That's
pure
the
heinous.
BLT?
Yeah,
Oh,
after a BLT
you-
wants one.
You
Well,
want
it
me
has
to, like-
BLT. Well, first of all, it has to have Tropic Thunder because it turns you chocolate.
Yeah, but he also wants he wants it. He specifically requested that one of the aspects makes people bald. He wants people to
there
get
is
bald.
balding and there's also shrinking, I think, too. So you could make him
Yeah.
a short black bald.
Oh my god, yes!
Calorie dense.
Calorie
Calorie
dense.
dense. Yeah.
I don't know how. I can't remember how to do the shrinking. I'd have to go back into my
I
game.
think shrinking
to
is one
search.
of the double ones.
No, there's one specific one that'll give shrinking. I can't. I've seen it, and I'd have to go through my list of stuff again.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, whenever we
hold
get
on.
there,
I
you know,
discovered the
we'll
double
name it
infusion
after
thing
BLT.
because I watched
Mhm.
somebody double
Mhm.
infuse beans, and it goes from glowing to explosive.
What?
Yeah,
What the fuck?
it made them explosive instead of glowing, which is something to think about.
All right, I'm ready to sleep. I've got all the stuff packaged, and I gotta just at this point I'm just ready to sling. Actually I should put them.
Well,
I host silvers in my pocket.
you have to take the middle bed sandwich.
What?
What?
You had the map.
What? Okay. I wish we could color them.
And aren't you the middleman
My
between
God.
us and our customer anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, all right. All right. Gentlemen, are you ready to make some money?
I'm ready to make some meth.
Okay, I gotta go speak to people, so. Oh, I also need my trash picker upper. Don't run me over!
I was nowhere near running you over.
I know. this is really
Dramatic.
dramatic.
Don't run me over!
I can't run you over, I'm walking.
Run me over.
I mean, what did you expect? After what you just said, there was no way I wasn't gonna immediately run you over.
Yeah, I guess I was asking for it, huh? Alright, I gotta go give some stuff to Benji. I don't know, I haven't got any DMs yet.
I think I
so
had
I'm a
10
little
by.
concerned.
How did I do that? Oh. Apparently, if you reverse long enough, it flips the camera around.
Yeah,
I didn't...
if you hold
Yeah, I do
right
not like
click,
it.
you can control the camera and it doesn't do that to you.
Yeah, I didn't like that. That was terrible.
It's jarring. Oh, Benjmeister. I'll take half of these. Give me some of this. And then I need you to take half the crack. Yeah.
Meth's already on the menu, boys.
Counter offer. Do it now. Find the shipping container at the super sacra. Okay. Oh, and I think last time we played, I think I also unlocked the third dealer.
Yeah, we did.
I don't think you've gotten friendly with him enough, though. I was
Yeah,
just looking at
we
it.
unlocked the ability to speak to him, but I don't think we got... I don't know if
I'll
we
go
I think
butter
you
him
have an
up.
adjacent one, so it's just, you know, wheeling and
I'll
dealing
go
until
butter
they're
him up.
happy.
Yeah, I'll go butter him up. Get the push-up bra out. I got it, guys. Don't worry.
push up,
We have faith in you.
I gotta go to Molly. Oh, our first person who wants hi-ho silver. Deal. We do it now.
So the name you're looking out of the people, you either want to make Eugene Buckley, Greg Figgle, and Randy Caulfield are your 3 that'll introduce you to the dealer. I said all those names and then instantly realized I would never remember that, so you won't.
Nope, all I remember is Eugene, so. $100 for 3 fixes, that's pretty cheap. Yeah. Guess. Oh! Oh, Lord!
What happened?
I just saw someone's face after they took the hard and fast. No, it was after the hi-ho silver, actually.
Yeah. That shit'll give you nightmares.
The casino.
As I say, it's actually quite a convenient drive to the places we need to go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I broke into the next property. Let's see if I can set something down. No, you can't. You can't place. You can't break in early.
Yeah.
It's good. That's a good thought, though. If you want to see, you can come to me, and I can show you the property, give you a tour of the property.
The laundromat only takes 2K?
2,000, yes.
Okay.
The next business is 4. The following is 6, and I don't know how much the last one is.
It's 8,000.
That makes sense. Given the increment of increase of 2,000, that would make sense, but...
Perfect, I need to go there. Hell yeah, motherfucker! No search today. Dealing meth? Cool. Squatting? No, exactly. Molly. Here's that for you. And I'll give you half of the Chipotle. Country girl, shake it for me, girl. Shake it for me, girl. Shake it for me.
I feel like there aren't as many cool things to discover around the map as I'd like.
Yeah,
That's valid.
I know that might be like asking for like more than like, you know, deserved, but I just like it when games like this have something that you can like stumble upon and just be like, oh.
the
probably add
lovely
more considering
artwork
that
is
they'll
the
expand the
one
map.
thing at this. Yeah, the artwork, the spray paint is always fun.
I love finding a new spray paint and being like, oh. Oh.
Oh.
So pretty.
You, Greg? Oh, you're Philip and you're high as fuck.
Hey.
Good.
We now have a lot more shelves in here, so if you have anything...
Alright, I still have to get...
There's
Oh no,
now
I
an
did
area
unlock
by
him.
the
His name
door
is
where we can put
Brad.
finished things.
There you are. What's up? I gotta go get more.
You need mixer?
Yeah.
Okay. It's about to be finished.
Yeah. Ooh.
There you go.
Dog gets to live for another 75 days. Huh? What? No TikTok drama. It lives forever. Forever. It probably will forever, to be honest. I don't think they're really gonna do anything about it, to be honest, Kiwi. At this point. I think we got other pressing matters, you know?
Hey.
You stock up with this. Stock up on that. Sir, I need more meth.
I'm
Need more
about
meth?
to finish another batch here shortly.
Okay.
As far as like I'm literally mixing it up. It's gotten hard. I just got to make it fast.
Sounds good. Oh, let's do another 20 for you. We'll do it. Okay.
Elaine out here looking like a businesswoman.
Elaine is a businesswoman. What do you mean?
I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best.
I'm a weed sommelier. You're a meth cooker. And she's a businesswoman. We all look the part.
Oh, I definitely look my part.
Alright, I'll be more businesswoman-y when I come back. I just need that
I mean, you
meth.
look very businesswoman-y.
Businessy womany.
Businessy.
gotta look at me in the eyes like that for? No.
Oh, we need more baggies. I'll be right back. I'll get more baggies.
Bring the car and just fill the car if you can. Can you afford more baggies? Oh, you've been out dealing, so you probably got cash.
Yeah.
We got a lot of deals expiring soon.
Yeah, I need to go deal with that first, actually. We're gonna Jip Charles, but Eugene... Next to the parking... Oh, parking garage back. Okay. I knew you were remodeling the milk club, but I didn't expect it to be a drug den. I'm gonna be honest, the reason why I thought about redoing the milk club is because of the milk barn in this game. Because, like, sizing was a problem for me, so... Parking garage is up here.
Thing's a bit of a size queen.
Yep. Yo. Yo, Eugene. 4. Next, the parking garage. You.
Get Eugene on that high ho. That'll get him.
I think he did just get high hose.
It's genius when you think about it, because it combines the two things about like the drug dealing lifestyle that they're the two best things about it: high and hose. So.
No, that's a good point. Got one of these and then. What the fuck? Hey, then you ain't getting one of those, dog.
Wait, what happened to his deal?
I only had one.
Oh, I was
didn't
right
wanna
behind
get
you with
fired.
more meth, but...
What the fuck? Alright, I'm gonna grab
Take my meth
baggies
deliveries.
and- Where are you? I don't see you.
Oh, I'm literally by the warehouse right now.
The warehouse?
Mhm.
The barn?
No, the warehouse, the illegal warehouse. I'm inside it now.
I don't know what that is.
The black market warehouse?
Oh, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, hold on. 6. Oh my god, hi Buffy. Do you have a gun?
No.
Was that a gun?
No.
Oh, okay. Alright, where are you? Where are you right now?
Where would I get a gun from?
I'm at the black market. I'm just trying to figure out how much money, how much cash I need to do what I need to do for my next batch.
Literally impossible for me to have a gun.
Oh, okay. Give me the drugs.
Yep,
Put them
here
on
you
the
go.
pallet. Thank you. A park. Cool. Boop, boop.
I need $1,600 in cash, so I need another 900. Can I pull out $900?
Go for it. I just deposited 5,000. So. How are the dealers doing? Benji needs more stuff. Molly needs more stuff. Benji, are you home? No, Benji's out dealing. Okay. Fine. Beth? I'm upticking. Upticking. Right. And taco takeaway. Wheat. I'm right here. The wheat. What's up, Beth? Hi-ho Silver's coming right up. Enjoy. The auto shop, but I want to go. I don't know if the store's still open. I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
Curfew starting soon.
That don't matter to me.
It should. You're really bad at avoiding the cops.
think she likes the attention.
Somehow with the fastest skateboard as well. That's.
I'm gonna forget to fucking give you guys money.
I'm not gonna give you product. What do you want?
Yeah, I'll go get more product in the morning. That's fine. I'm back and I got more baggies.
Cool. I didn't even consider the fact that I only need baggies.
Yeah, I'm putting them on this rack over here. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. I feel like the woods needs a doped up cult. That would be cool if you could like access a cult.
Yeah, if you got your addictiveness up high enough.
I saw one of the recommended things is like have event things where like groups come through, like ravers come through, or there's a rave and
Yeah.
they'll buy all the MDMA that you could make, or hippies come in and want shrooms and weed and different stuff like that. Bikers want your meth.
Hell yeah, dude. That'd be great.
I think the other one was like businessmen or whatever buying up all your cocaine.
Hell yeah. 2, 4. I mean, there's those. 2. I host silver. Steel. Morning. Birthday in the morning. Alright, I'm ready to sleep whenever.
Yep.
We're so efficient now.
I ain't even got any plants going at the moment.
That's crazy. We have so much fucking product. Holy cow, look us hello, MCR Music. Welcome on in. How are you doing? Hope you're having a wonderful day. 6,000 earnings in one day. Fuck yeah. Good. I'm glad. I'm just dealing drugs with my friends. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. You know, just being everyone's favorite local drug dealer.
Local miscreant.
I don't like that one as much.
Why not?
Because that one doesn't sound as cute.
Fair. Okay.
Did you know that I don't know if Easter's different in any other location, but Easter here in America is on 420.
Is it?
I guess it should be the same for everyone. It's a religious thing, so.
When do you have to flirt with a British bodyguard? What? I gotta flirt with Eugene so he gives me the next dealer. At the casino. Wait. Whee. Yo, Benji. Take 2 of these and 1 of these. Hey, dude. There you go. Yikes, Jeff, you looking bad, buddy. At least you got all your hair. Hey, Donna. Yeah, I got the stuff. Here you go. Enjoy. It was a bad gentleman reference. I've been up for 20. Oh my god, you should get some sleep. Over 24 hours, bro. I'd be tired as fuck. Turn gas mart. And then I can go talk to Molly. To be honest right now, sometimes I see Cranky Frank and I think it's you. Oops. Schedule afternoon for 10. Afternoon, okay. Are you sure that hair is his? Imagine he just fucking pulled a wig off a fucking bald bitch. And he's been wearing it because he's so high. That would be crazy. I need you to take these. Really. Thank you. Taco Tickler's pawn shop. Easy. Right near each other too. Big noise, man. When do we get like necklaces and stuff? Because I see that there's a necklace slot, like a chain slot. I want it. I want it now.
Hello?
Hello. My internet took a dip.
Hello. Oh. I was wondering why you didn't take offense to me calling you, saying that you look like Cranky Frank.
Honestly, I didn't know that
I
you
heard
left,
the lead up
so-
to that question before my audio cut out, but I didn't know where it was going, so...
Valid. Valid?
Bobby, would you mind inviting me again?
Oh yeah, I got you.
The 2 high-ho silvers counter offer 240.
Does nobody ever like appear online on Steam?
Oh, that's probably my fault. I'm probably invisible. Oh, you found me. Okay.
No, I can find you. It's just the people I have to look through gets a lot longer when you have to counter in everybody
valid.
offline
I
instead of
feel like
everybody
a lot
online.
of people don't typically stay online anymore. Or appear online. I go shopping.
Yeah.
I want to go shopping. Actually, this one, and then let's try that first. Like this. Stop.
Whatever reason the invite didn't work, can I get another one?
Oh yeah.
I'm online this time, so you should be able to find me easier. It just says that it invites me to play, but doesn't give me the option to join. I don't understand what's happening.
Maybe you can join off me.
I'll try that. No.
Maybe because you maybe you disconnected weird and it like.
Yeah. Let me see.
Do I need to wait till next day?
Let me just try. My Steam might just be acting up because it shut down while I was in a game.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's still not saying you're online, so that's probably part of it. If you said that.
Yeah, I'm gonna restart. I'm gonna shut down Steam and try it again here.
Yeah, stick with this then.
Because taking a U-turn takes the most time out of everything else in this drive, I literally just drive backwards. Because the way that the game drives, it's
Oh
actually
my god.
surprisingly easy to drive backwards.
Valid.
Alright, do you want to give it another shot trying to invite me?
Yeah, 1 second.
Very Bob Burger
thanks.
businesswoman, thank you. I thought of another way I could do my outfit. I don't really want to do that right now. Here.
They should just add a thing where you can just join your friends, like if it's like, you know, with a lot of games where they have a join option with a code or something. Yeah.
What? Oh, we got Brad!
Hell yes.
Got Brad. Oh, Brad, what have you done?
No, cop. I don't have anything suspicious on me. I just have let me see, 100 jars and like 80 like baggies. That's not suspicious, right?
Nah, you're a My Little Pony fan, you'll be fine.
Freaking my industrial baggie purchase.
Hell yeah, dude. Ooh, I didn't mean to buy both of those. Yeah, now I look like a little business lady. I like this. I like it. Actually, I don't know if I like it with the jacket or without the jacket. I like the apron. I want to get a different shirt though. No, I kind of like this. Oh, near the statue. Oh, fuck. Ooh. And then the western wharf, and then behind the auto shop. I'm preparing hundreds of sack lunches for the local soup kitchen. Hell yeah! But the sack lunches are in dime bags. Wink.
Well, yeah, they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a dime bag of soup.
My bag of soup.
This isn't a charity.
Molly
Selling
just ran out of
incredibly small increments of food to poor people.
Why did it start me back at the house?
Rip.
Oh, I think because that was the closest house I was to when I got booted. Maybe that's
Oh,
why.
that makes sense.
I mean, we have so much packaging resources now at the house.
Hell yeah. 100s of ramen seasoning packets. Hell yeah, dude. I remember there was this like little news article on Facebook about this kid who was
What?
like
You're back in
dealing
Frost.
Cheetos, but they would do singular Cheetos in a dime bag and they'd sell it to kids at school.
Oh yeah, he got told off. Which is really funny.
Yep.
I think they should encourage kids to be intelligent like that and learn to make their own money and not be, you know, under the rules of everybody else who's trying to keep themselves rich and everybody else poor. Because explaining to that kid why he can't do that, all you basically have to say is, because somebody else is making a lot more money than you're making, and they don't want you to make money off of them making money. Because that's the truth.
Sure. We can do it tonight. This one goes away.
Well, the plus side of getting booted and having issues joining was, oh, my pseudo got delivered while I was fussing with it. So,
oh, yeah.
boom.
5 hi-ho silver, sure. Gotta go do the auto shop one first. Oh, this is bullshit. No, I can make it.
Hey.
Bye. Back to the safety of my meth corner.
Whoops. He's like a real gangster without a shirt. Would you sell a sub sandwich as a dime a dozen? Our school has our school can lose our lunch services if we don't prevent students from selling during the school day, which is technically still in line with what Poppy said. Interesting. Damn it.
Wish you could stack shelves. Like, put shelves on top
Oh,
of the
too
shelves.
high? Yeah,
That'd be
kinda
nice.
cool.
Yeah, because... I'm running out
Or
of
if they
space.
sold, or even if they sold a different shelf that was even taller. So, like, once you
Yeah.
got into these taller buildings, you could...
We have a lot of Chipotle.
Oh yeah, people love the Chipotle. Yeah, fuck off, Geraldine. Nobody likes you anyway.
Oh my god.
This way. Whee! Wait, what, Buffy? Or not Buffy, devouring, what does it mean to you don't stop them from selling? Does that mean, like, you can lose your lunch privileges if you don't stop your kids from selling drugs at lunch?
school-
Is that what that means?
The school will lose their funding for lunch.
Basically, what they're saying is we've devised a system where
Selling
if you
snacks. Oh.
don't rat each other out.
Really? Alright.
I just wanted to see what the reaction was when somebody came home. This is what happens if I'm left in a large area by myself. Okay.
I like the way you say that.
It was lonely, so I turned all the lights off and hid in a corner.
That's valid.
Oh, I didn't realize that you weren't done mixing that. That's my bad.
Don't worry,
I'll put it in the machine once I'm done.
no worries. We do need more machines, I think, honestly.
Stop it. There's a cop where I need to deal.
I would say deal with it, but
So the cop's doing a good job then.
just do your
Fuck!
job. Just do your job better.
Fuck! I can't when Lucy's fucking swanging her pussy right out in the open. Shit.
What's she doing? Hold up. Wait a second. Hold on.
She's swanging her pussy right out in the open. The cops can see me deal.
She's slanging her shit.
She's slanging that sus muffin, if you know what I'm saying.
Sus muffin. Don't ever say those words again. That's the worst thing. Sus muffin is the worst word I've ever heard for pussy.
No, everybody. Alright, Lucy, I still fucking got your fucking drugs for you.
You needed the
Fucking
beans to make the
bitch-ass hoe.
Chipotle with this, right?
Yeah, I've got it in my inventory.
Okay, I put the weed on the other.
There we go.
Gotta do what you gotta do for that late night Chipotle.
Honestly, though, if there was like a strain called Chipotle, I think it would be genuinely popular. Just give it a name.
Like, why is it so quiet? Oh, yeah, because I didn't open the music back up. My thoughts are too noisy. Get the music up.
The voices.
I wish you could have a radio in here. That'd be pretty cool.
That's one of the suggested
guys.
things, is to get a radio in the game.
Hell yeah. Hey guys, I'm back.
Hey.
Oh, this chipotle. Oh, this chipotle.
I got you a bunch of packaging as well.
Hell yeah, dude. You know, I'll put it to good use.
I'll steal some of it too.
Rude. Rude?
I'll swap it out for some hard and fast, though. I put some hard and fast in each.
Okay. I'm not mad about that then.
There's also backup packaging over by the door. There's tons of it.
Oh, thank you.
There's a lot of jars and some baggies. Because I figured
yeah.
we have a lot of Chipotle, so we're probably gonna want a jar.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot
I
of
started
it.
jarring it. Yeah. Boop.
Hey, do you have 2K in cash?
Okay, in cash? No.
Okay, I'm gonna
Put it
need...
in the ATM.
Okay, I'm gonna have to... I'm going on an adventure.
I believe in you. I'd like to give these to Benji and Molly before we go to sleep. That way they can just start slinging in the morning. That's enough of that. I want to start doing... Okay. I like doing the baggies more because I don't have to count. I just kind of press, rotate, and then I just drop them in.
Yeah.
If only there's something that comes up that could potentially be easier packaging than bagging or jarring.
Is there a better packaging station?
Technically, yes, but it also takes a lot of product to use. When you sell by the
I know what
brick,
you're talking about. Yeah, I was gonna say bricking.
I'll break a marijuana. Are the drug jars recycled? Obviously. We're an eco-friendly business here. Where do
also
you take
for
us?
all jars, also rectal use only.
Excuse me?
Huh?
Excuse me? What do you
We've
mean
all
jars
seen
only
it.
rectal use only?
Just like our product, rectal use only.
I'm concerned.
What's funny is I have a sticker. I have a huge water bottle. I don't really use it much anymore. I used to use it more when I wasn't home as much, but it was a big hydro flask one, and I put a sticker on the bottom, so you'd only really notice it if I was drinking out of it. But it said it was a for rectal use only sticker on the bottom.
That's crazy. Must have had a lot of interesting conversations about that one, huh?
If people noticed, I think most people are caught off guard and they're like, "Wait, what?"
That's valid. 2, 3, 4, 5.
I remember what kind of sticker my friend Pumpkin got from their work. But it wasn't for rectal use anyway, it was something similarly funny that they put around everywhere. They worked at a mortuary for a while.
Oh, interesting.
They were a corpse taxi.
Oh.
Basically,
Nice.
someone dies, they're the ones that go pick it up and take it to the guy. It was a really interesting job.
It sounds like it. Alright, I need a stock.
Okay.
Back up on Hi-Ho Silver, and then channel. And then... I'm gonna give them these. And then...
So for these, I want to grow Granddaddy Pup and put it in
I should give them some crack too,
this.
huh?
Okay. And
Actually, no, I'll put these here. I'll put the baggies on this side. Someday, guys, when we're rich, we'll get a packager. Because I think that's, like, something that would be nice, is having someone to package stuff.
Oh yeah.
We don't need it now, but...
The same person would also, like, move shit around and stuff, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Use this one for my clothes. Get more bottle onto this rack. Alright, so now we have that many hi-ho silvers, which I have a stack. And daddy perps. These I want to give to the kiddos.
What?
To Benji and Molly. And then I gotta go see how much Brad costs. But I am gonna be right back because I gotta go use the restroom. I'll be right back.
Treat.
Treat? I said dinner and my cat went. Ew, you freak. You freak.
Okay, I'll go outside.
Hey, watch out.
I've been banished under the stairs,
what?
now I'm getting
Look at these
insulted.
people in our house.
What? Hold on, come back. Mama's dealing drugs right now.
Look. Out here.
What the fuck? Ew,
Yeah,
they're both ugly.
Wow.
That's unfortunate.
Imagine you turned up for like the first day.
Oh, that's what this guy
before,
was. I had Jeffrey as my cleaner.
That sucks. Why couldn't you get hot bitches? Buffy, why'd you hire ugly people?
I didn't get to pick, okay? I didn't get a
Yikes.
catalog to choose from, okay?
Yikes.
They're hired on loyalty, not looks.
Damn, that sucks. But it does make sense. Most attractive people would probably betray you the most, honestly. Actually, that makes a lot of sense.
That's it.
My brain, it does.
I don't assume, you know, people's trustworthiness based on if they look good or not. It's interesting take, I think.
Thank you.
Never thought about it.
I was just
Well, I mean,
making
I just thought
nonsensical
about
comments.
it, so.
It's kind of concerning, honestly.
I mean, yeah,
do you
probably.
do you think that if you were pretty, you'd be like allowed to like betray people more?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
People might be more
I'm pretty.
forgiving.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Without hesitation. That's why pretty privilege. The word pretty privilege exists for a reason.
This bitch and if I was pretty, bro.
Was that just... I looked up at your screen as you ran by the building and just big purple letters said cock.
Yeah, one of the things says cock on it, I think. I don't know where it is now, but yeah, one of the graffiti tags is just cock in big giant letters.
Elaine has so much weed in her hop.
Oh my God.
Like if she
I'm not gonna get caught.
If she got arrested, someone's getting a promotion. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, definitely. But that's the thing. I'm not gonna get caught. Yeah, they stole my money, but they're hot, so it's okay. Exactly. Ooh, Benji, you got a nice payday for me. Thank you.
Did you hear that they're like trying to give Luigi the death sentence?
I thought they already did. I thought he was getting, or not death sentence. I thought he got the like sentence to life. At
No,
least.
I don't think they have.
They're trying to
they-
actually like death sentence him.
Do they have that still?
No, they're trying to do it just to spite him. Basically, it's fucked up.
That's crazy.
It's not gonna happen because it's gonna...
Oh, if it happens, there are gonna be so many people that are like, okay, it's time. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
Wait,
technically it's
that's-
already time, but whatever.
Oh, it's been time for a while.
Well, it's gonna be... Whatever the outcome is, they're gonna... Just with... No comment on what happened, any comments on what happened, but no matter the outcome, because of the publicity behind it and how things were handled, they're going to appeal it because of stuff like people couldn't leave it alone to let everything happen. People had to put their 2 cents in on the news, and HBO came out with a documentary in the middle of his
Really?
trial,
It's
What the
massive
fuck?
smear campaign. Yeah. So there's going to be appeal. They're going to sue HBO. I guarantee it.
They have officially even said out loud that they are not sure they have the right guy, and they're still doing this. It's crazy.
Damn.
Like, they have publicly stated that they are like not 100% sure that it was him, even,
That's crazy.
and that's it's insane what's going down. Hey,
Alright, I'm home. More crack? Hell yeah, dude. Alrighty. Yeah, we can sleep. We can sleep.
also there's a
Alright,
bunch
take
of
care
prepared
all
shit over here.
prepared
next
shit
to the
over
door.
where? Oh yeah, I saw. Yeah, I just loaded up our
We'll go around our bed.
I was like coming up like, all right, guys, let's sleep in our beds. And I look and the 2 of them are green. And I'm like, God damn it, not again. Not
Back
again
to
with this
snuggle.
bullshit. Not again.
Back to Cuddle Puddle. Hold on one second.
Well, Jeffrey and Robert watch.
Oh, no. Mom said I could have my own bed this time.
You can
Chat.
buy more beds. if you
No, I'm
need
kidding.
to.
I don't care.
We're
Nah, I'm just
probably
leaving.
eventually gonna get more employees anyway.
I just wish that it didn't take up the fact that you have to get them a bed and stuff. It's like it takes up so much space.
I can't wait until they let you buy bunk beds. So you can really get it like fucking.
Oh,
crazy.
that'll be better.
Oh, God damn it.
You can-
We would really be
the
slob
first place is-
squatting.
The first place is called the sweatshop, okay, but I feel like
That's true.
it's just a nice apartment. Like, you know, like,
That's valid. Yeah, it is.
you can't even have people live in the motel. You can't even like
Yeah.
hire people in the motel.
And I just have them all live in the motel in the apartment and commute to work, for fuck's sake.
I think you could. Like, could you not just have their bed
No.
be in a different location?
It has to be at the location that they're assigned to.
I'm out wheeling and dealing, chaps. Someday I'll get a car. I'll make it blue. No, I don't know. I kind of want a bumblebee car. Parking garage, demolition, construction site. Oh, that's like kind of off, but alright. I love seeing just green people walk around.
You just know you left your mark on the community. Take a deep breath of success.
How you know they're our customer?
Loyal.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, Beth, you're not looking too hot, sweetie. Want some more? Hey, Philip. You just came down from it, didn't you? High host silver. More expensive. Afternoon. Donna, you're looking awfully normal today.
You look very surprised to see him moving around.
Oh, me,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, alright, nothing. Exercise over where Molly is. I'm invisible. Hey, Dean. Yeah. You want one Chipotle? Make that an even 200. I'll do now. Behind the construction site. Wanna hear.
We need to get some cash ready so that we can hire the third dealer.
Sounds good. I mean, I have 4,000 in my pocket. I think we might be fine.
Yeah, then you should go find
I'll
him.
talk to him. Yeah, I'm gonna go find him. Oh my god. Hard and fast. Can we make that like a whole number, please?
What number did he ask for?
45.
45 hard and fast? Damn.
No, 485 for 2 hard and fast. No, 4 3 hard and fast.
Oh. I thought we were talking about the quantity, not the not the price.
Yeah,
I was like,
imagine someone's fucking bulk buying our shit. That'd be crazy.
I think they were reselling it. I'd go break their legs.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god, wait. There's a little guy. There's a graffiti of a little guy here. Hey. Speaking of little guys, I need to change one of the little guys because,
Oh.
I have a new little guy and it's the Toad Frog. I love him.
You know who Buffy would vote for. Would get
Oh
voted off
god,
the
he's so
island.
big.
What?
What?
You said you had to get rid of a little guy, I'm assuming, on your stream?
Yeah, and I meant one of the pets. I replaced the
Yeah.
Chow Chow with the Toad Frog.
Oh, you're getting
No,
rid of the chat.
no, I was saying I know who Buffy would vote for.
Yeah.
Vote off the island.
Yeah. And luckily he doesn't get a say in my little guys.
All I'm saying is that Poodoo should be unmade.
Well, it's too late. He's already been made.
That can be rectified.
Someone decided when
Yeah.
there was an option where it's like you know, we could just let him, or we could just strap him to fucking wheels.
He's getting better though. He's been learning to walk.
You don't strap wheels to a dog that's gonna get function of its back legs again.
But I saw it. He's going through rehabilitation, man.
Have you seen that thing's
Alright,
face? You can't fix that.
Stop. Stop. Don't be mean to him. Oh, whatever makes you pay. Yo, Kevin, I've never met you before. You want a free sample? 45% chance. 88. 79. We'll do 79. Oh, fuck, you mean you don't like it?
Dude, I should send you my sticky note for the next group of clients that I have that I need to figure out. Like the next group of people that I want to get on my customers I want to get.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote out everything I need for it.
Hell yeah.
Oh no, don't! Get away from me! I'm just out here trying. I don't have anything. Woman, get out of here. Fuck off. Swear to God, if you assault me, I will throw you in the ocean. Thank you.
Throw him in the ocean.
I'm just picking up some trash so I can have some cash, and this lady comes up on me asking for drugs.
Dude, we have money in the thing. Just take some money out of the thing.
What a weird number of amount of cash to launder. 1405.
So it was all I had in my pocket, and I needed the ATM to reset. Okay. Yo, ma'am, are you Louise? Oh no, you're Pearl. Fuck. Red car. Where the fuck am I? Can I go down this way? Alright, who wants what? Got. Yeah, everything's fine. So 2 hard and fast. Yeah, sure. Need to find Louise. Goes to the left. To the left. Yeah. Louis, would you like some methamphetamine? No, okay. This one? Alright, thank you, Louis. But I want to hear new client.
I just picked up a little bit of trash for cash.
That's the homeless guy.
How much money I get? 185 bucks.
2,000 signing fee. You got it. All right, bud. Need to give you some items. You're gonna take the rest of the Chipotle on me, the hard and fast. All right, this is your first job. Time to assign him new customer.
It looks like he's ready to go fishing more than he is to sling some drugs.
I don't want to talk to Charles. I don't want to talk to Geraldine. I don't want to talk to Greg. He's very spooky. Lucy with her fucking sus muffin. Get her.
What was that sentence?
Nothing.
Elaine has decided that these things have some kind of personalities, and I'm very worried about her sanity.
You can take.
Has she been stealing from the supply this whole time?
And Jennifer. No. Fuck off.
I want someone to make death as a thing and see what happens if you take it.
Ooh. Diner, there wasn't more of the thirsty threads. I'm near thirsty threads. It's in its central. Okay. My last deal with you, alright? I go back home to get some more chipotle. The diner, where the fuck? Oh, is this the diner? No, it's a slop shop. Diners over here. Really? Oh, it's this way. She's a twisted trickster. Everybody wants to be his sister's mister or look. Even though I'm not supposed to.
Guys, I've made $228 in trash today.
Good job. Being a helpful part of society. 3 done. Morph me the restaurants behind the 30 threads. They want hard and fast. Oh, bad. Do 2 of these. Central Canal, I can't do yet. Okay, and then morph me the restaurant. Whee! Alright. Twisted trickster. Everybody wants to be the sex. Ow, fuck. Guys, I can't wait till we can laundromat taco ticklers. There's so many deals over there.
I'm really confused by what I just made.
Why?
What do you mean?
Because, judging by the things I put into it, I don't know how I got the things I got out of it.
Okay.
So there's something about mixing that I don't understand, apparently.
That's invalid.
I made 2 of them. Because I was testing stuff.
Mm-mm.
Ryan, would you like to sample one?
Sure.
Also, I didn't name anything special. This was the suggested
suck.
name.
Why is my vision a little narrowed? What is this?
It's sedating.
Sneaky? What does sneaky mean?
I don't know.
Do I disappear when I crouch?
No. But I think you might be, like, less visible to cops. I don't know.
Ooh.
You look crazy.
Do I? Oh, I can look at myself. That's right. Oh my god.
I was trying to make BLT, but it didn't give me the things I wanted.
You got 2 of them.
I had to. Hey. Okay. So I was trying to mix Viagra, mouthwash, and donut together to get,
Ew.
like...
You know that combination is hilarious in its own if you bought those 3 at a store.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so if I put this, I just get Tropic Thunder and Sedating, okay? Then if I mix it with a donut, I should get Calorie Dense. Because that's what...
What?
Right? And that's what makes the Nutty Professor, right? Is you get Sedating, Calorie Dense, and thing. But when I then mix mouthwash with the Nutty Professor, I get Big Smegma. And I don't know how that works. I hate that
Ew,
sentence.
ew, ew.
Huge
That's so
smegma.
gross. Ew.
Absolutely huge.
Schmegma.
Okay, so I just made
Mega
something called.
schmegma, bro.
Okay, so apparently if I cook with balding, it takes away balding. So I can't have balding and calorie dense. That's making me sad.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Molly.
Just sell it to people who are already calorie dense, you know? You have the other things haven't even worn off yet, and you're already hitting it again.
All it did was make me fat.
But aren't you already the fattest your character can be? I don't think it actually
Yeah.
changed anything.
I was just curious.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm gonna need to actually like experiment with shit for a bit to get a good strain here.
God
I'm
damn, that guy is green.
gonna need someone to like.
Oh, Jesus, Beth. Oh, Jesus, you are not looking okay. Here you go. Ugh.
Okay. Need to buy a little bit of everything here, bud. Let's add some horse semen, some addy, some iodine, some battery, motor oil, flu medicine.
What if I just
Megadine.
put 20 containers of horse semen on this?
I don't like the way you say that. Hard and fast counter offer. Let's do.
What if I add horse semen to fast, hard and fast, and I just name it "Come Hard and Fast"?
Ew. Guys, we attained a net worth of $100,000. Yippee!
Woo!
Thanks.
Okay. Let me take a sweet nug.
Guys, we made over $10,000 today.
Dang.
I have to launder more money because I capped out the thing again. But I can give you guys some money if you want.
Yeah, if you just give it to us, we can
Yeah.
put it in.
I'm
So I'm
pretty certain I can hit the
Start
ATM
with.
again.
I want to give a nice heady bean base.
A daddy bean base.
That made Dark Bud, which has sedating and foggy. And then if I mix that with horse cum. Actually,
If you had to name a strain after your content personality, what would the name be? Probably like honey milk.
I was gonna say mommy milkers.
Ew. Need more stuff. I'll carry these ones.
that was bean, battery, and now Addy.
Addy.
If you end up with death, I'm smoking that shit just to see what happens.
Okay. Damn. Alright, so that was for these. I'll go get another bag of 20. And I'll start drawing up the rest of it. among the three of you, that's 3.4K a day. Just need to work like that for the next 3 years, and you can afford a house at the current market rate. Really? I mean, that's not so bad comparatively to other jobs, to be fair.
Hey, bro.
That's just yes.
I'm afraid to
Hold on.
look behind me.
There you go. It's in your packager.
Oh
Right
hell
now.
yeah!
My latest experiment.
I want to overheat one of these meth cooks one time just to see what happens. Honestly, if it just gets mad or if it actually explodes. What do we
Hey,
got?
what's up?
Enlightenment.
Yep.
Smoke it. Smoke it. We need a quality assurance.
This is gonna do some stuff.
That's why I'm trapped under the stairs.
Yep.
Why did my
Oh my
vision
God.
zoom out?
His pot head, the pot got bigger. His head is so big.
Yeah,
I see why you call it enlightenment.
That's thought-provoking. He also has glowing eyes, and he's a woman, and he's ginger.
And he's woman and he's ginger. Oh my God.
Man,
You became a woman. You're a woman.
It's called
Man, cheaper
generizing.
than. Oh, that's what that is.
like
Oh, that's interesting.
you wanted to.
So it looks like hiring both of these guys for one day filled
Mhm.
both of these shelves up.
Jesus.
Nice.
Actually, it almost filled both of these shelves up, but there's enough like clippable bud on the plants to fill the shelves up fully.
Nice. We're rolling in it now, guys.
So Enlightenment was pretty good, but I want to see what else I can do. So let's try. Let's start with the horse demon.
Oh God.
I deposited the $4,000.
Thank you. You could have just kept it on you if you wanted.
Oh well, I mean, I don't need to re-up yet, and I can pull out though. Right.
Alright, Capito.
Now I'm really watching you.
With your enlightened eyes.
Yeah. Apparently, it makes it so that your it makes it so that your torch is always on. Like it gives you like
Oh.
that's what bright eyes means. It gives you so that you have a torch effect at all times.
Interesting. I didn't know. And then I'll leave those ones. And then I'm just gonna trade this, and then I'm gonna do 21, so I could give 7 to each of the. All right. All right. Hey, bud.
Bedtime?
Yeah.
I'm definitely in the
bedtime.
right state of mind for bed. Let's do this.
What does that mean?
I'm
Should I be
enlightened.
concerned? Oh, you're not enlightened anymore, bitch.
Oh. I'll just go this way then.
What?
Okay, bye. What's up? Huh?
This current strain, I'm struggling to name it. It's euphoric. It's euphoric, ginger, thought-provoking, and bright-eyed.
Oh, snot clarity.
Or Harry Potter
Post-
fan fiction.
Post ginger nut clarity. And then if I trying really hard to get some of the more interesting ones.
No, that's valid.
Oh. The suggested
okay?
name for this is Mega Rhino.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm keeping that
Fun.
name. Hey, Rhino. This bud right here is your destiny. You wanna try it?
He's upstairs.
Come here.
Oh god, okay, I'll put it. Where to put it?
Thank you for the
Put it in
wellness
here.
check.
This is gonna be wild.
Smoke it, smoke it, smoke it.
What the hell?
Whoa! Whoa! What the fuck? Ah! How are you? You're like. What the fuck? What effect is that?
Electrifying.
Oh, okay, 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 okay.
It's quite a mix there. On Mega Rhino. We should sleep.
Doc, I feel some weird feelings in my legs when I try to sleep.
Oh shit, we made 11,000 today. Sweet.
Nice.
Alright, go wheel and deal some more.
Now let's.
I need more crack. Or meth.
I put some on your shelf.
Thank you. Motel, casino, pawn shop. Okay.
You know, I think there's like some intelligence in this game when it comes to like
Not while I'm playing.
what it like names things, because I'm
Mm.
not gonna lie, some of the names it suggests are like actually like on point, and it makes me laugh.
That's fine. No, it might be like certain adjectives are associated with like the certain effects.
That makes sense.
Hard and fast, here you go. Pawn shop. Is anybody at home? Benji's out dealing, but he's like right behind me, so I could go talk.
I don't need to stop at your
Benj.
checkpoint if I run through the woods.
Benji! Take this. Wait, give me that crack. Wait, no, give me the crack. Give me. Benji! Thank you.
I'm learning something about how these work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a bad effects actually lower the value.
What is considered a bad effect?
Oh.
Paranoia and toxic, apparently.
Nothing else. Is there any of my dealers around here? Molly's at their house. Ooh-wee. Let me give you stuff. Here you go. And then I'll go deliver in front of the motel. I don't know where Brad is yet. I don't mean to go slow. Ooh, hi-ho silvers, yeah, for a counter offer of $350. And do it now. You want 2 hi-ho silvers? It'll be the last bit of hi-ho silvers until I go back to the house. Oh. Construction site? Aw, why am I already at the demolition place? Hey, here you go. And then the construction site, the motel, and then I gotta find Brad. I gotta find Brad. Let's just go. There are kids screaming out my window. It keeps spooking me. They randomly scream, and I'm like,
I got one that's worth over $100.
what? How? What'd you mix?
It's called Dream Diamond.
Whoa.
It has sneaky, balding, sedating, slippery, tropic, thunder, and anti-gravity.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Whoa.
Hard and fast.
I can jump so high. Keep hitting into lampposts.
I don't see. Part of me is like, do I want to experiment with two new things, two new combos to see what I get for?
Me, baby, we are nothing but mammals, so let's do it like I know it on the
Jesus Christ. I love when I come into the store and it's just like horrific creatures behind the counter.
We created this reality, Buffy. This is what we created. This is the world we live in. And you know why? Because of our hands.
What if I make some math with Addy and a battery and call it the Energizer Bunny?
Yeah! Wait, put a little Viagra in it.
Okay, we can triple. Then I'll just, yeah, that would just be one step further than the fast and loud would be, or fast and loud. Fast and hard
Okay.
would be.
Elaine, I'm probably starting something for a friend. I posted on
Do you
Discord.
know what's really funny about that? Right now? I literally just bought Battery and Addy.
That's
Oh
funny.
shit! 6 months and
literally-
half a year it has.
I was literally running back with it right now. 20 Battery and 20 Addy.
Thank you so much, Buster, for the 6 month to get to tier 2. Thank you so much. And Red
Oh
Rally
my
looks
god!
so
I
good.
walked into
This sketch looks so good
the
already.
store after you, and I see this woman.
Very
Yeah, that's
proud.
the
You're doing
creature I was
great.
talking about.
I'm gonna try at least one batch with a 3D. See if the value's worth it. Continue that going, but
Ew, no. Kevin didn't like Hi Ho Silver.
Kevin's a God. Someone give me a gun. No.
That was a high paying product. Hmm?
You know what upsets me more than anything is that the guy, the gun dealer, has a. But I don't think he
what?
sells it. Do you know how badly I want to get that and tase my friends?
Literally playing bills here, peeps. You are. Thank you so much for the tier 2 for 6 months. You added 30 minutes to the timer as well. So.
Let's see what my.
What's up, Doris? You look awfully normal today. Over here. Nope, I had to go to the other side.
When someone comes to see, ask like, so who's your quality control person? And you point at me behind my meth table like a gremlin. That guy?
That guy? The guy that's cooking meth? Yeah, he cooks meth high all the time.
He says it's part of his creative process.
I mean, I want the weed. Thanks, Dean. Bye, Dean.
Hey,
I don't find Brad.
pick out this.
Where's
I'll put it in the
Brad?
thing next to you.
Midlife
Brad's
crisis.
up there. Ooh.
Alright.
You look at the effects.
I'm spoken, and we're gonna find out what the effects are the real way.
Oh, bread.
Did I just get fat?
Yeah, you got fat, bold, sneaky.
Well, joke's on you. I was bald to start with, so.
Damn.
Oh my god, my vision's super.
Yeah. Fat, sedated, sneaky, and
Sedated,
balding.
yep.
Yeah. Hey, do you want... In the thing behind you.
What you got? Oh, is that all? Oh, that's more
Yeah.
batteries and stuff? Jesus.
Yeah, I already bought it. So I was
Oh,
gonna
I
make
have-
a weed strain of that exact thing, and then you were like, I'm
Well,
gonna
do it.
this,
I already
so-
have this stuff on me. Try it.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it could be different because weed starts with a base ability. Base ability, Jesus. But meth does not.
Well, I don't like that it
No.
suggested sweet splooge for that.
Ew. At least it wasn't sweet smegma.
Give it time.
No.
Let's do what we get for the Energizer Bunny.
That's wrong. Welcome to the new Dionysus. Boop, boop, boop.
That's
Bag 'em
another
up.
almost $30 worth of value on the just from adding batteries to it.
Hell yeah. This one. Mix those guys. Welcome to the cult of Dionysus.
Oh, here's some Energizer Bunny. Oh wait, no, I should probably actually bag it.
I can bag it. I'm not doing anything.
Oh no, I already had the bags in the thing for it. I got you.
$100 soon to enter my oh wait, so I'm doing a commission. It's a pair of socks. Ooh, that's cool.
Would you say it's a? Never mind. I'm not going to continue that statement. I think you're going to like the color of this, by the way, Elaine.
Ooh, is it blue?
It is not blue, unfortunately.
Ah. Hard and fast, yeah. More.
You know what? It's more the name is more suitable now that I think about it too because of this.
Hell yeah, added Viagra.
Look at the color, and the name
Hey,
is
are you
more
okay?
suiting than expected.
Oh my god, it's pink. Oh my god, I love it. You want me to list this for sale?
Yeah, I just didn't want to do it until you had it on you.
Oh my god, there is so much different. There's so many different types of weed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've been basically just trying to find the whole tree at this
No,
point.
it's valid. It's valid. Are you smoking it all? Is that why you're black?
What does that mean?
Your skin is black. How are the dealers doing? Betty's got 2K, Molly's got 1K.
Man, why don't all the fun stuff, like,
Hmm.
not, like, actually, like all the fun effects don't actually, like, sell well, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, exploding, it reduced the value of this weed down so much.
You have exploding weed?
Yeah, there you go.
What does this do? So how do I explode?
I don't know.
You're fucking taking. Hi,
I
fruit.
didn't know. I thought you were volatile. I thought I was
No,
gonna...
no,
Am
you're
I ticking?
You're taking it away from me, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're ticking. I can hear it.
Come here!
No!
I need help! Help me!
No!
Oh my god, it's getting faster! It's getting...
Oh!
Jesus!
I died!
Fuck. You can die in this game!
Hide him out of the
Respawn.
car.
You,
Did that
like...
come with it? That cost... Oh, that was all my money! I was... I had a medical bill of $250. I only had $228 on me.
Rip.
So $50 for diagnostic medical imaging, $35 emergency, $80
Damn.
$80 surgery, $40 anesthesia. Yeah, you haven't seen how much meth I've taken. Anesthesia.
That's why it's so much that I had to use, like, a ton of it.
Oh, broke again. That was funny, though.
I just heard
Oh,
you
my
ticking and I was like, oh fuck. How's the game going? Good. We are making a lot of money.
We going to bed now? Sorry.
That's
Some
fine.
of us are having...
I could... Wait,
Some
I'm
of us
gonna...
are-
Wait, give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go launder another 2,000. Realistic medical bills, nodders? Hell yeah, it is. That's the most
I
realistic
mean,
part
to
of this
think about
game.
it, it is primo medical stuff, given the fact that they were able to put me together after exploding.
That's true.
I'm gonna be honest, the way that you ragdoll this game is kind of graphic.
Yeah, a little
Like,
bit.
you... Like, it looked, like, like, it was like, damn, he dead.
I was so close to lane 2, I couldn't even...
It's really heartwarming that, like, the last thought was you should take someone with you, you know?
Mhm.
That's fucked up.
You didn't want to be alone.
You always wanted to go to a nice place. I thought heaven could be the nice.
Damn, that's crazy. Get inside. Get inside. We're going inside.
The fact that we have hospital bills makes me laugh so much.
I was wondering what happens when you die. I know now.
Yeah,
Hey,
I think
Elaine?
it's like... Yo, what's up?
Look at that. You want to sell those then, huh?
Oh my god, they're called strawberry cookies?
Yeah, that's the
cute.
that's the thing it gave me for them.
That's cute.
I
You
feel
want me
like
to
the
sell them?
random ones, yeah, we
Or do you
don't
wanna
want
keep
to
'em?
use them.
Okay.
Making explosives easy. I figured out what makes explosive now.
What makes
What makes
explosive?
explosives?
2 donuts.
What?
What the fuck?
So it's basically the evolved form of calorie dense, which kind of makes sense.
Hmm.
One day we'll unlock something.
What does double horse semen do?
it doesn't do anything. Not all of them
Oh.
do like double things. It's really weird.
Alright, I have to go buy more baggies, so I'll deal with the strawberry cookie in the evening. Yeah, more behind the diner. Okay.
just give this. Just put the strawberry cookie in a jar and give it to one of our dealers.
That's a good plan. I should do that actually.
Make them the bad guy.
Okay.
Make
so
them the bad guy.
I'm gonna want to go get my ingredients for. For some more chipotle. Are we low on chipotle or?
No, everyone's kind of stacked on Chipotle, so if you want to take your time with it, it's fine.
I never know how much of something you have in your like inventory because you
All of
carry
it.
like a warehouse. Of
I'm
weed
afraid
wherever
to
you
know
go.
how much she would carry on her if the game gave her a backpack or a fanny pack or.
Dude.
Okay.
Oh my god, dude, this cop.
Alright.
40% chance.
Hmm.
You don't like this again. I'm
Not gonna lie, my
not
stuff went in
telling
your
you,
truck
bro.
because I didn't realize it auto-selected the truck.
Alright.
I grabbed it, so you have room in your truck, by the way.
The diner. I'm not used to going to the diner.
Yeah, I put stuff in the truck automatically if you put it on the thing that you can park on.
What's up, Philip? There you go. Question gas station in the basketball court. How much money do my dealers got on them? Molly's fine, Brad's fine, Benji's fine, but I need to collect the money.
Ah.
Benji! Benji, wait. Benji, wait. I want. Oh, wait. No. What's up, Beth? You're looking better. I'm happy. Here's your hard and fast for the day.
The day, like, it's
Yeah,
like,
because I'm gonna see her again tomorrow, dude.
makes it sound
Beth, if you bulk bought, you would last you longer than a day.
Yeah, but we don't give discounts for bulk buying. If anything, we
No, I
surcharge
didn't say
for
it'd be a
bulk
discount. I just said it'd last longer.
buying. Hey,
I
Dean.
love.
Here you go. Have a nice day. Alright. You want 2 hard and fast for $2.70? That's fine. 1 hard and fast. Yeah, sure. Hey, I heard about you from Nelson. Could you hook me up with 2 hard and fast? For another 10, yeah?
I'm really terrified because I have a name for this already, but if it gets a certain trait, that name is not okay.
I'm excited.
I'm trying to mix
What?
horse semen and Red Bull so that it gets the like long face and athletic tags, and I was gonna call it Racehorse. But if it also gets Tropic Thunder, that name becomes a bit of an issue.
Just call it Seabiscuit at that point.
Canary Western Wharf is right here. Oh my god, bro! Thank you so much for subbing with Prime. Added another 30 minutes to the timer of the subathon. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy the content and hang out daily. Smile. Yippee! Alright, Crimson, the Central Canal, next to the parking garage, and next to North Waterfront. Okay.
Do you have hey, Rhino, do you have a Viagra that I can borrow?
Yeah.
Can you put it somewhere so I can pick it? I just want to see what this does. I don't even need
There
to
you
use
go.
it really.
It's on the shelf.
Considering I watch you the most on Twitch, I figured it only makes sense. Aww, that means a lot. I work hard to make this house a home.
Can we,
Past the guy.
And
There you
can we
go.
offer you any drugs? In exchange for this Prime.
Yippee! You will be our, you will actually get discounts. I've been giving no one discounts in this game. But you, I would give you a discount.
Okay, I'm gonna try mixing one of these with the... Oh yeah, this just made the thing I was worried about. There we go, racehorse has been created.
Yippee! Hard and fast, Central Canal, and North Waterfront. North Waterfront. Okay. I'm already near the, not really near the Central Canal. Is Brad home? Brad is not home. Oh. Whee!
Okay, headphones. I get it.
love
You
the
want a new battery.
skateboard.
Stop beeping.
Was your headset beeping?
Yeah.
Sup? Sup, Austin? My favorite guy.
This is the new product. I'll be most
I see you're offering me drugs, but I can't hear you yet. Okay, what you got for me? Dark Horse. Of course it got Tropic Thunder.
I'm thinking about adding this to our lineup. What do you think?
What
Right
is
there.
what is the side effects of Dark Horse? Munchies, sneaky. Oh, that's why my vision.
Oh, yeah, you know,
What is
yeah, okay, cool.
Munchies do?
Where's
I don't know
Molly?
what
He's
Munchies
behind me.
does.
Guys, I just made 15,000 in a day. It hasn't even been a day.
I like it. I killing it out there.
Oh yeah. Oh, man. Okay, I'm bringing this money back so that way I can give it to you guys. I like that I'm just seeing like very monstrous people just running around the city because I deal to basically everybody in the city now. Because we've
Yes.
unlocked all the potential buyers, I think. Make sure.
All of them thus far.
Yeah, thus far, yeah. Like the way it sounds. Yo, what you doing? What you doing, Javier? You looking at the car that I want? Fuck you. That's fucking my car, bitch. Why can't I punch him? Punch you in the butt. Punch you
Why
in the
do
back of
deals
the head.
keep expiring?
I think it's because the, a lot of baggies. They're dealing with a lot of baggies, the AI. Because those are the AI deals. Those are the bots dealing with them. I can't wait to get the priest
How has
addicted
Brad
to
not
crack.
sold anything? Did you just empty Brad's
I
pockets?
just empty everyone's pockets.
Okay.
Put some money
I'll give Brad a
here.
break then.
You know, surprisingly, no one's ordered the Energizer Bunny yet. And I just think they haven't opened their mind to it yet. You know, we just got them on Hard and Fast. You know, settled
Yeah.
on Hard and
There.
Fast.
It's
I think
just
they're
a
a little
step
tender.
above, you know.
I'm
They're
not sure
probably
they're ready
just
to take
so
that step.
addicted to the first one.
Yep. I believe it. How is everyone doing on product? 10, 31. Molly's got nothing. I'm gonna take some from Brad. Brad's got 2 more.
I binge watched also like 10 episodes of Apothecary Diaries last night.
Yeah, you liking it?
Nice.
Yes, I am.
I like it. I like the main character a lot, Mau Mau.
Yes, it makes me laugh every time when like she has to sneak away and goes gremlin mode. Just that type of animation always makes me laugh.
He's at his house.
There are so many horrifying creatures walking around this street.
Yep. Yo. Wait, yo, you. Jennifer.
Oh, are
Jennifer.
you? Is there any chance that it is that you're not just taking every deal possible?
No, I'm pretty sure I'm taking every deal possible.
Oh, I'm just.
Brad, there's a cop behind you. What the fuck? I thought you had 31 on you. Oh, it's because it's okay.
Yeah.
I need like.
Watch out with that Brad guy. He likes to skim a bit off the top.
He likes to skim as much as Benji and Molly does, to be fair.
Could you imagine how much more would I have gotten with 20% skimmed off the top by each, with 20% skimmed off the top and $90,000? How much money did I lose if I made all that? I couldn't have made all those sales myself. That would have been insane.
Here you go. Wait. Take some hard and fast.
What does explosive mean? You're ticking, huh?
Alright, Benji, I'm coming. Well, actually, Benji, I'll deliver to you in the morning. Counter offer 40. Sure, we can do it right now, Donna. At the skate park, hell yeah. I'm already right here. Finger 24/7 baby machine. All right. Woohoo. Buy more baggies.
I just bought literally like 200.
Never mind.
I mean, you can buy more. We'll probably use them, but like, you know.
Oh, how
There's
no
already
calls
a-
a curfews. Yeah, I know. It's like the NPCs are still out too.
I just deposited all the money you had in the thing, in that shelf.
Sounds good. I'll add another bunch.
Who?
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole shelf full of baggies over here.
Hell yes, thank you. Yet you only get arrested for it? Because I never said I was good at math. We're feeling good today. Guys, I don't know what to tell you. I think we have an empire on our hand. This is great.
Can't wait till we start making that booger sugar.
Oh yeah,
Hell
'cause
yeah.
we can use the automation from
The presents. I'm
okay.
feeling good today.
If I start with
Hell yeah, guys. I am ready to sleep and it's only fucking... Oh, what time is it? What's the time of my TV? 10:37. Hey guys, as we're getting more famous, we're hitting it. We're hitting the hay early, you know. No
I'm gonna
more
do some
after.
mixing before I. Actually, no, I just do it tomorrow.
It doesn't really matter. There should be an emo with Chibi Lane having a doobie. Oh, I should put that on my like Peepo sit, but I'll call it like doobie sit or something, or maincoow doobie.
Dubious.
Dubious. All right, there's 8K on this rack. All right, I'm gonna go out and deal more. Need. Thanks.
I'm glad you left some cash because I'm about to have to re-up on my stuff.
Benji. Now we're gonna take this product off.
Oh, brain work. Yes, thank you.
I've gotten so good with the skateboard chat. Fuck yeah. Whoop. Ah. What's up? Here you go. I need to grab a jar for Benji. I grab a jar. That's what I like that there's an ATM right outside the fucking church. I didn't realize that, but there is.
Oh yeah, there is,
Should
isn't
be...
there?
To be the no holding it doesn't do anything meme, that's valid. Need some jars for Benji.
Oh. Oh, what did I do? Oh!
Ew, you're throwing up! Ew! Ew, don't throw
What,
up me!
You're throwing up?
Yeah!
Oh, gross.
It's toxic! I got the toxic one!
That's what that does, okay.
Oh, you can override different weeds with other weeds. That's good to know. For future.
3 times, yeah. Central Canal? I'm already here. Oh. Joyce. Yeah, we did now. Under the West Bridge. Go find Benji. I think Benji's at his house. Whee! Benjmeister. Benj, my man. Got stuff for you. This and... Oh, not that one. This one. I have my money, though. Give me my money.
Oh god, there's a glowing green man walking down the street. Is that you, Lewis? Oh, it's Kevin. You know what?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell who's who when they're all glowing green.
When they're all aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. How are the other dealers doing? 2 Energizer bunnies. We're gonna up you $20. We can do it right now, Austin. My man.
I was gonna say, how
I'm
much
gonna get
were they
mom
paying for
product.
2 of them?
For 2 of them, they're currently paying $355. Right, 355? Yeah, it's $355. Chipotle, yes. Alright. A Western Wharf. Wait, was that a deal happening? Can I take money from one of you? No, I cannot. Wait, one of you is Austin. Austin. There's Energizer Bunny. Here, go. And then the Western Wharf. If you want my body and you think I'm sexy, come on, sugar, let me know. Yeah, it does me let me so. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, bow, bow. Bow, 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 bow. What's up? Here's your 2 chipotles. And then I'll come back after I get more drugs. More drugs. Let me get some for Molly. What's Brad doing? Do I need to take money from him? Nah. He's good. And next guy.
Hey,
Yeah.
watch this.
Oh, I
Anyway.
don't like that.
Yeah? You don't like it?
Not a big fan.
I'll start next morning. Like what? 1:15? Yeah, I'd rather start in the morning. Phil, excuse me. Good lord. Get out of my... Oh my god. Actually, just... E. Let's go get more drugs. More drugs, more money, more drugs, more money.
What was... Oh, that was you sprinting, leaving a trail behind you. I was like, what the...
Hey, bread. More drugs, more money, more drugs, more money. What are the other
More
businesses?
bitches.
How much do they cost? Post office, the car wash.
The Cyclops that gets me.
Wish you could deal drug. Yeah, me too. Honestly, I wish I could like give some to the cops. No, I like would have like an effect where like they cool down for a bit. What in the fuck knuckles did I walk into? Why are one of you on fire?
No reason.
Wait,
He's the hot shot. What do you want?
very valid. Actually, I'll give her 10. 6, 10. They try to arrest you and you bribe them with drugs? Exactly.
I think they would prefer cash, but...
We're warning a little. We're starting to run low on, weed strains.
Yeah, I'm trying to make good ones, but honestly, it's really hard to make good wheat strands. Because it's kind of hard to tell if you're going to get good shit or bad shit.
That's valid.
So I might just stick to, like, just mass producing, like, the Chipotle. It's doing good.
I mean,
Sadly,
hey,
that
man, we
means
could
that
just...
I won't have any use for any of this purple I just think, so we might just we might just start packaging straight up purple.
That's fine. And then
Or
if you want,
purple
we can
and
get
something
into...
simple. Or should I upgrade to... Wait, let me try something I haven't tried before. Because that might be
Okie dokie.
a good thing to try.
Oh my god, there was a cop radio sound right outside. Like, I think it was actually someone on the phone, but it sounded like the cop radio, and I heard it in real life, and I felt the deepest dread in my belly.
What? Well, you did just shout loudly in your house with open windows that you were just chanting more
I'm
drugs,
dealing
more money.
drugs! No one's gonna believe me.
You'd be surprised by how many people live out there with paranoia.
I feel like where I live, they'd be like, you want to sell me some?
And you'd be like, but you don't even know what I do, and they'll be like, I don't care, just snum.
Someone's gonna get this for their kid, not realizing what it is. It's gonna be someone religious or something. They're gonna get mad. The mom's gonna walk in and lose her shit because our son's in there making drugs.
Yeah, I know, right? And the dad's probably gonna be like, Beth, it's a video game. Is he good at it? It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, like, I don't think it's so much a problem that he's doing it, but if he was doing it badly, then that's like, you know.
Yeah, because that shows he's not a good businessman.
That's where I draw the line, at least.
Bobby, do you think you're gonna get into crack, or do you think I'm just gonna stay with weed?
Oh, I'm definitely gonna get into crack.
Cool. I wonder how long until we unlock
just
that,
out of
though.
context.
I was just wondering what, you know, I gotta know what I'll be dealing. What we'll be wheeling, you know?
You're gonna have to name one of the cocaine Snot Rocket.
Hell yeah! Like it. I'm out of product or something? I'll leave more money here for you guys. Catch up this. Our baby hi-ho silver. The last bit to package up. Our last 33. I'm gonna start charging an extra 100 for this hi-ho silver.
I think you'll have it forever then.
Some of them are fine with it. Some of them want to just take it.
Wow, I've never had a drop there.
At the gazebo.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to get it on my way back. He's 8 to Benji. Stack up. Oh, actually, no, I lied. We have 46 left. Not counting the 20 I have of hi-ho silver in my inventory. We'll be okay. Still gonna try charging a little extra, though. I've been charging like 40 extra, or 20 extra, but now I'm gonna start charging 40 extra. For hi-ho silver. The artisanal. What do you want? Hi-ho silver? Counter offer? You won't get away with it.
What do you mean?
Hi-ho silver away.
What?
He's making a joke about saying hi-ho silver away.
Oh. No.
It's okay, guys. She got it in the end.
Hey, I got it in the end, guys. It's okay. North Waterfront. It's over here. Is Molly out of product? I think I just gave Molly product. Yeah, she's good. Always nice to see you. I was just at the skate park, damn it. Hi, Moira. Got the stuff? Yeah, 2 high ho silver. Here you go. Skate park, and then Dean. Yeah, I'll do it in the morning though. Donna, why do you look so normal? After all the drugs I've given you, you still look normal? I think you should do more.
I think you should do more is crazy.
Everyone else looks weird, and she just looks normal. I think if you pick up litter in front of the cops, it should, like, lower their suspicion of you a little bit. I'm home. Alright, am I packing up this granddaddy perp?
Yep.
Granddaddy perp? Okay. You guys know when we unlock crack? Like what level that is?
When we get the next supplier.
Yeah. We get the... It's in the docks, so once we hit Enforcer 1...
Oh, okay.
Then you gotta get on that sales game again, and... There's also another dealer in that section, but, you know.
I'm ready. I did not mean to do that. Well, that's fine. You good, buddy? Crash
Yeah,
the
I just
car?
need Nearly.
So that's why we can't have nice things.
Nah, we have plenty of nice things that we can break. I love your model's fangs. Thank you, my little teeth. I will teefies. I will teefies. Boop, boop, boop. Boop, boop. Just the 2 of us. Just the 2 of
So,
Every time you walk up to me now, it's like, what drug are you gonna hand me?
nah, I'm done in my experiments.
For now, until we get into some other weird shit.
Over the overpass is so far away.
What are you getting from the overpass?
Seeds.
You could
Seeds
meet up
for
with
the
them too
weeds.
if you...
That's what I'm doing. That's where he is.
Oh. I mean, depending on if you're willing to spend $200, you can have them deliver it.
We could probably do that, but
Yeah, we have
Doesn't
plenty of
that
money.
I assume that would take delivery time as well, which is...
Yeah, it does. It takes 4... It depends on how much you... But yeah.
I mean, we're about to go to sleep. It's nighttime.
That doesn't eat into the time for whatever reason, I don't think. But if he wants it right now, the fastest way is 100% meeting him.
Oh.
At nighttime, I sometimes have trouble navigating.
Yeah, it's so dark.
The roads change at night.
More jars. Wonder what Pixels is cooking. I can hear it. I can hear him cooking in the kitchen. And my high little ass is hungry.
I went to step out to go to the store real quick, and there's a goddamn cop hiding in the fucking forest.
The fuck, stalker? Rude.
Yeah.
All right.
Bro, running all the way from the fucking that area to our house is a real pain in the dick.
You could have taken a skateboard.
That's an inventory space that I need.
Good point. Ow, 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 ow. What's the bonkers for, V? What's the wackest bonkers for? You going to sleep? Is the wackest bonkers for eat? Or the wackest bonkers just cuz? Both are valid, to be honest. Just to say hi. Understandable. I think after this day, I might end stream. Thank you for the head pats. I'll be gone in less than half an hour. Understandable. I think after this day, I might end my stream. I don't know. Coffee, I need counsel. Should I stream tomorrow, even though I'm moving my RP date stream to next Saturday because I want to prep it a little bit more? Or should I just stream on Monday?
I think do whatever you want.
God, you.
I'm gonna be real.
You also have D&D tomorrow, so if you don't want, I mean, I don't know if you want to stream again on a Saturday, then go right into streaming for D&D.
That's true. I might. Okay, I'll take a break and we'll come back on Monday.
You deserve a break as well after. You've been going a while, bro. You've been doing stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to sleep for like 24 hours. That's what my brain keeps telling me.
You deserve a good long, like, rest.
Yippee. I mean, like, I'm very impressed with that. For my first uncapped subathon, we went for, like, fucking, like, a week? A week? 2 weeks? I don't fucking know. 2 weeks? Almost. Actually, yeah, today's day 13. So, Monday would be day 14, so 2 weeks. That's fucking insane for a first subathon.
Impressive.
Fucking wild.
Are we going to bed?
Probably should find. Yeah, I'm ready. I was just looking at.
Oh, I was doing something off screen, so I just didn't want to make sure I was.
No, you're good. Oh my god, Choco's still streaming. She's co-arting with Heroic. I'm gonna go raid her then.
Well,
Go raid her.
You just. Wow, way to be a friend. I've had her pulled up all day.
I had her pulled up the whole time. I just didn't know she was still streaming because she said she had to go early, you bitch.
That's
Fuck you.
That's probably what her commitment was. Date night.
Yeah, I get that now. Whatever.
I'm really just giving you a
Whatever.
hard
Are we
time
sleeping?
because it's funny.
Go sleep. Better go sleep.
I'm pulling up streams.
1 second before I
The
go.
amount of
so
streams
cute.
that play in the background of computer is insane. Oh god, I'm stuck.
I'm so funny.
If I remember, I try to keep like everyone's streams open.
Yeah, I try.
It's a memory
Sometimes I
thing.
forget, but I
Sometimes,
try.
especially if I'm playing a game, I'll be like, "Oh fuck, people are streaming."
And then I'll open my
Yeah,
fucking tab like later, and they'll be like, "Who the fuck are these people?" Because I've
Oh,
been
I love
eight.
doing that. Go to
Been
sleep
reading
with
it.
like a bunch of tabs open and be like, "Where will I end up?" the fun one is when you open up the next day and it's all the same stream, and it's like, at what point did I end up at the same place? None of these people I'm watching knew each other, but I ended up at the same place.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like that I'm looking at Choco's stream, and her little PNG is a little candle like Heroic. Very cute.
Mhm.
There we go. Sorry
Very
about that.
You're good. You're good. We can keep playing. I just wanted to do it on a transitional moment.
You
So
know what?
I'll
I've
be right
never
back.
watched so many VTubers in my life, and I blame Elaine.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Alright, I'll be right back if you guys want to say goodbye to chat really quick.
Goodbye, chat.
chat.
Alright. I only have 3 open now, especially because it lags my computer so hard. No, that's so valid. No, yeah, that's so valid, especially if you're using Chrome. But we're gonna go rate Choco, so thank you everyone for hanging out with me, and thank you Fruit and Buster for the subbies today. We fully gonna do at least a little bit more of a 14-day stream. We unfortunately didn't hit the spooky game, but who knows, maybe we'll do that later in the year, maybe in October, but we'll see. I mean, it's not over. I could get duped, but we will see. I love you guys so much. Go have fun with Choco. Like a raid message, there's a raid message because I keep forgetting to fix it. But I love you guys so much, and thank you guys for just letting me have just such a wonderful week. I love you guys. Remember, be good, be great, and please be brave out there. Have fun. Bye bye. Bye bye.